Good afternoon. Will the Standing Committee on Crown Corporations please come to order? Before the committee can proceed with the business before it, it must elect a chairperson. Are there any nominations? MLA De La Cruz.
I nominate MLA Brar.
MLA Brar has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? Hearing no other nominations, MLA Brar, will you please take the chair?
Our next item of business is the election of a vice chairperson. Are there any nominations? MLA De La Cruz.
I nominate MLA Pankratz.
MLA Pankratz has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? Hearing no other nominations, MLA Pankratz is elected vice chairperson. This meeting has been called to consider the annual report of the Manitoba Hydroelectric Board for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025. At this time, I would like to remind everyone that questions and comments must be put through the chair using third person as opposed to directly to members and representatives. Are there any suggestions from the committee as to how long we should sit this afternoon? Mr. Narth?
We would like to thank you, Honourable Chair. We would like to recommend 4 hours be used for today's committee.
It has been suggested that we sit for 4 hours. Is it agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, and so ordered. Before we begin the opening statements, we have received a request that the Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of Manitoba Hydro, Alistair Fogg, be seated at the table and answer questions on the record, because it is Manitoba practice to allow 2 representatives from an organization to be seated at the table during a meeting to consider an annual report. This would require leave. Is there leave for Mr. Fogg to be seated at the table and answer questions?
Agreed.
Leave has been granted. Does the Honourable Minister wish to make an opening statement, and would he please introduce the officials in attendance?
Sure, I'd be delighted to do that.
Minister Sala.
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Chair. So before I start, I'd be delighted to have an opportunity to introduce our team here. I'll start with our Chair, Jamie Wilson. I'll speak about Jamie in a minute in my opening statement. I'm delighted to know that he's joined us here on board as our new Chair. Of course, Alan Danroth, our CEO, and Alistair Fogg in our CFO role. To just provide my opening statement. So good afternoon, and thanks to everyone for joining us here today. On behalf of our Manitoba government, we'd like to honor the sacredness and importance of this land and of the ancestors that once walked where we're standing today. The Anishinaabe, the Innuak, the Dene, the Dakota, the Inuit, and the Anishinaabe nations, and the Red River Métis Nation, who paved the way to what is now known as Manitoba, home to all treaty people. The reason we share this information with you is that it's a reminder of our treaty histories and the original homelands of all those nations which have become home to all of us here today. I want to begin by saying that it is a sincere honor to be here today in my capacity as a minister responsible for Manitoba Hydro. I've said it before, but it deserves repeating. Hydro is indeed the crown jewel of our province. It's more than a utility which provides low-cost electricity to Manitobans. Hydro has been and will continue to be key to the economic development of our province. Every day we see more stories about the structural transformation of our economy that's currently underway. The The world is moving towards deep electrification. Companies and industries are looking for clean, green baseload power. And it's in this context that Manitoba Hydro provides our province with a key economic advantage. Simply put, hydro is our greatest asset today, and it will power our prosperity into the future. As the minister responsible for hydro, I am deeply honored to have been entrusted with the stewardship of this asset by our premier. We all know that I'm working with a team of outstanding professionals who are doing the work day in and day out as we write the next chapter in hydro's story. I've already shared who's joining me at the table, and our new chair, Mr. Jamie Wilson, of course, Mr. Alan Danroth, our CEO, and Mr. Alistair Fogg, the Vice President and CFO. Let me say a few words about these individuals. Members opposite might recall Mr. Wilson from his time here as a deputy in the former government. As deputy minister, he served the previous government in 2 portfolios of education and training and growth, enterprise, and trade, and he served with distinction. James also served as Treaty Commissioner at the Treaty Relations Commission of Manitoba. As members are likely aware, he currently serves as Vice President, Indigenous Strategy, Research and Business Development at RRC Polytech. I have sincere faith that his deep combination of skills and experiences will serve him well in his new capacity as chair, and that his guidance will be a tremendous asset to Hydro as they continue on their journey towards reconciliation. On behalf of the Manitoba government, I'd like to formally welcome him to this role in this public setting. And on a personal note, I'd like to thank him for agreeing to serve, as I know the invaluable leadership he'll bring to the organization. So thank you so much, Jamie. On that note, I'd like to say a few words about another individual who dedicated 2 years of his life to help lead Manitoba Hydro, Ben Graham, our outgoing chair, who also provided invaluable leadership and mentorship to Manitoba Hydro's executive team. He helped lead Hydro into a new era, an era where Hydro refocused on the basics by ensuring our aging infrastructure was being attended to, an era where, for the first time in years, Hydro began the process of bringing new generation capacity online, and an era where Manitoba Hydro took important steps to engage with Indigenous communities. For the first time in a decade, Manitoba Hydro's board traveled 1,000 kilometers north to hold a board meeting and meet with local First Nations leadership. Through Ben's leadership of the board, he made it clear that Hydro had a responsibility not only to provide low-cost, reliable power for its customers, but also a responsibility to those communities directly affected by Hydro's development and operations. On another personal note, I would like to thank Ben for the superb counsel and insights he shared with me over the past 2 years. I'd also like to take this opportunity to publicly and personally express my sincere thanks for his service as chair of Manitoba Hydro. As mentioned earlier, also joining us at the table is Alan Danroth, Manitoba Hydro's CEO. We're here to discuss Manitoba Hydro's annual report for 24-25, and I'd be remiss if I did not note that this is the first full year report from our CEO. I understand that he enjoyed his appearance at the committee last year so much he's graciously agreed to return. But in all seriousness, Alan is comparatively new to Manitoba Hydro, and I would like to thank him for his leadership over the past year as he helps to implement some of our key government priorities like the Affordable Energy Plan. So thank you, Alan, for your service to the people of Manitoba. And finally, a few words about Alistair Fogg, who plays a critical role as Hydro CFO. Alistair's been a long-standing Hydro employee and has provided our government with invaluable counsel in the lead-up to Budget 2025. One of my key concerns as both Minister of Finance and Minister responsible for Manitoba Hydro was how do we make generational reinvestments in our hydro infrastructure while keeping rates affordable. Addressing this wasn't easy, trust me. As members of this committee are likely aware, government decided to eliminate the capital tax on crowns and reduce the debt guarantee fee paid by Hydro. This decision resulted in Hydro retaining roughly $200 million more within the organization each and every year. And this decision helped to enable our generational reinvestment in Hydro while keeping rates affordable. What members of the committee would not know is that Alistair was a key support in helping us to get to that decision. So I share this because I want the committee and all Manitobans to know that the quality and ingenuity we have in the leadership team here at Hydro. I could not have fulfilled the commitments we made to Manitobans in the last election in a responsible and prudent way without their guidance and wisdom. So thank you, Alistair, for your leadership and service to the people of Manitoba. So on to the annual report. While we're here today to talk about the annual report from Hydro, we should all spare a moment to reflect on the challenges facing Pimicikamak as they work to recover from the impact of the power outage and subsequent impacts on the community. Last year, I had the honor of spending a few days in the community of Pimicikamak, and I know how strong and resilient the community is. But also, I know how difficult the current situation has been. Throughout this emergency, I've been in regular contact with Chief Monias, and I'd like to thank him for his service and leadership during this truly difficult time. With respect to the annual report for the year ending March 31st, 2025, let me say just a few words as this topic will, of course, occupy this meeting. It was indeed another year of progress. We launched a signature initiative of the Affordable Energy Plan, which seeks to bring online 600 megawatts of majority Indigenous-owned wind energy. This new capacity will not only provide new green energy for Manitobans, it will also help to further the process of reconciliation, which is a key priority for me as Minister. Over the year in question, we saw work that led to the permanent ban on the wasteful use of our hydropower for crypto mining. Work was also undertaken that culminated in Bill 28, which transforms and modernizes how large requests for power are dealt with in Manitoba. No longer will we see the first-in, first-out system of allocating one of our most cherished assets, our energy. Go forward, we will allocate power in a fashion that best serves the interests of Manitobans. Finally, during the year in question, significant work was undertaken to develop Hydro's Integrated Resource Plan, or IRP. While the IRP will be unveiled early this year, I can share that it is a robust plan that will ensure that new generation capacity is added to meet those needs now and into the future. And before I turn it over to the Chair and CEO for their opening remarks, let me conclude by saying that I'm incredibly proud of the work that our government and Hydro have undertaken over the past year. And I'm very eager to discuss this year's annual report and share the good news on what's been accomplished to serve the needs of my fellow Manitobans. With that, that's the end of my statement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Minister. Do the representatives from Manitoba? Does the critic for official opposition has an opening statement? Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I'd like to start off by, of course, thanking Mr. Wilson, Board Chair, Mr. Fogg as the Vice Chair, and of course the CEO, Mr. Danroth. At a time, and also, of course, the Minister. Thank you for, I'd like to thank the Minister for being here as well. Very important that all those that I mentioned, including the Minister, here to answer important questions for the most important, I guess we could consider it, Crown Corporation for Manitobans. And Manitobans greatly value the Crown Corporation of Manitoba Hydro. But at a time when many Manitobans are struggling to make ends meet, struggling to afford the most basic essentials of life, we have a government that is continuing to place a greater burden on the backs of Manitoba taxpayers and ratepayers through higher taxes and now higher utility rates at Manitoba Hydro, likely with annual increases for the next decade. Manitoba Hydro has racked up an astounding $25.34 billion in debt. That's almost $17,000 of debt for every single Manitoban. The entire province has a net debt of around $38 billion and close to $80 billion in gross debt and liabilities. Manitoba Hydro's debt alone is that of $25.3 billion, and that's quite alarming. To put that debt into perspective, at $25 billion, this corporation, Manitoba Hydro, carries more debt than half the countries in the world. Out of 209 recognized national states around the globe, 118 countries carry less debt than this one Crown Corporation in little Manitoba. Hong Kong, for example, with a very large population, has just under $25 billion of debt. That is unacceptable and speaks to a model of governance and a lack of oversight and accountability that is neither sustainable or justifiable. I'll have more to say at the end of this committee about how we can begin to make Manitoba Hydro and this government more accountable to Manitobans who are, of course, the owners of this corporation. We have a lot of questions today, and I would like to direct these primarily through the chair towards the CEO and the CFO. to get a better picture of this debt and their business plan to manage it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Do the representatives from Manitoba Hydroelectric Board wish to make an opening statement?
Nope. Recognize Mr. Wilson.
I'll recognize. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister and all committee members, I'm honored to come before you today with our President and Chief Executive Officer, Alan Danroth, and our Chief Financial Officer, Alistair Fogg, to review Manitoba Hydro's 24-25 annual report. As the Chair of Manitoba Hydro Electric Board, I can attest fully to the excellent work performed by not just the executive of the utility, but indeed all of our valued employees in the 24-25 fiscal year to safely operate, maintain, and expand our electricity and natural gas systems, while continuing our work to plan for Manitoba's energy future in alignment with our provincial affordable energy plan and continue our journey of economic reconciliation with First Nations communities across Manitoba. Our customers can rest assured that despite some of the headwinds we faced in 24-25 fiscal year, Manitoba Hydro continues to operate with the best interests of our customers at the forefront of our work every single day. Now I will turn it over to our CEO, Alan Danroth, for his opening remarks to the Standing Committee on Crown Corporations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Mr. Danroth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, good afternoon, rather. Thank you to the Chair, Minister, and all committee members. As always, I'm honored to appear before the Standing Committee on Crown Corporations to answer your questions about our fiscal March 31st, 2024 to March 31st, 2025 annual report and provide an update on the past year at Manitoba Hydro. Before we begin, as is our practice at Manitoba Hydro, I'd like to do a land and territorial acknowledgement. Manitoba Hydro has a presence right across Manitoba on Treaty 1, Treaty 2, Treaty 3, Treaty 4, and Treaty 5 lands, the original territories of the Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge these lands and pay our respects to the ancestors of these territories. The legacy of the past remains a strong influence on Manitoba Hydro's relationships with Indigenous communities today. We remain committed to establishing and maintaining strong, mutually beneficial relationships with Indigenous communities. And I would like to add that during these difficult times, our hearts and minds are with the people of Pimicikamak as they work to recover their infrastructure. We remain in daily contact with the chief and community and continue to assist where possible. Let me also take a moment to highlight the incredible work performed by our more than 5,000 employees across the province. The efforts they make to ensure we continue to provide Manitobans with safe, reliable energy is nothing short of inspirational. I can see that their efforts are driven by a dedication to their communities, mutual support of their coworkers, and pride in the professionalism they show in everything they do. Although outside the scope of this annual report, Hydro's mantra of getting it done safely has never been so dramatically illustrated as during the unprecedented wildfire crisis of this past spring and summer. Fires damaged or destroyed power lines in eastern and northern Manitoba, left several communities without power. For the first time in its history, Manitoba Hydro was forced to temporarily evacuate some generating stations as fires threatened to cut off evacuation routes. Our emergency response crews were vital in helping suppress fires, assist in moving employees to safety, and installing value protection that prevented much more damage to our infrastructure. Once damaged areas could be accessed safely, our construction crews, supported by incredible feats of logistics and despite remote locations and difficult terrain, were able to move massive amounts of material where needed, repair damage in remote and difficult terrain, and restore power weeks sooner than expected. We are grateful to the support of our mutual aid partner, SAS Power, led by their exceptional CEO, Rupen Pandya. SAS Power provided additional specialized vehicles and crews to assist in reconstruction, all the while prioritizing safety, and we thank them. While our employees avoided any fatalities or serious injuries on the job during the wildfires, our Manitoba Hydro family was devastated by the tragic deaths of our employee Richard Knoll and his wife Sue at their home during the wildfire in Lac du Bonnet. The fires were driven in part by tinder-dry conditions throughout the province. That parched environment and the lingering drought also contributed, or continued rather, to impact Manitoba Hydro in other ways. Overall precipitation across the Lake Winnipeg and Churchill River basins has been well below normal for over 2 years. Basin precipitation has been the lowest recorded in the last 40 years, significantly reducing the water available to flow through our generating stations and generate electricity. Manitoba Hydro's long-term resource planning and drought operating plans ensure that our firm energy demand, including provincial demand and existing long-term export obligations, can be supplied under the lowest recorded drought conditions. The plans are based on a hydrologic record for the entire Nelson and Churchill River drainage basin that dates back to 1912. But low water conditions like this also limit our ability to generate surplus electricity to sell on the export market and generate revenue. As a result, we reported a consolidated net loss of $63 million for fiscal year 24-25. Drought conditions have persisted, and as been reported publicly already, we are forecasting a consolidated net loss of approximately $463 million for the current fiscal year. To reiterate, our continuous supply of energy to Manitobans is not in doubt, even during drought, thanks in part to our system design, the work of our talented hydrology team, and vital interconnections to neighboring wholesale markets, which allow us to import energy as required. However, the persistent drought does demonstrate the need for moderate, predictable rate increases, as Manitoba Hydro's revenues are highly dependent on factors we cannot control. We submitted our 2026 to 2028 electric general rate application to the PUB in March. The application sought a 3.5% increase per year for 3 years beginning this month. Our staff provided the PUB and interveners with some 10,000 pages of information, and we participated fully in the public hearings late last year. The PUB responded recently with an interim order for a 4% rate increase effective January 1st. We await the board's final decision later this year, and will restrict our comments on rates here today as much as possible out of respect for the PUB and their process. Included in our submissions and testimony to the PUB was the need to replace critical aging infrastructure to ensure the reliability of our system and to develop new energy resources to meet a growing need for energy in Manitoba. To meet these challenges, we are guided by a new strategic direction aligned around 6 goals: enhancing the employee experience. Without engaged employees, nothing is possible. Improving our financial health, upgrading SAP, which is at end of life, ensuring HVDC reliability, which is 20 years past its end of life, planning for new energy resources in anticipation of a 2030 need date, and providing modern customer solutions, which speaks to technological advances and solutions ranging from advanced metering and electric vehicle charging networks to demand response programs. These goals are all aligned with the direction provided by government policy and its Affordable Energy Plan released this past fiscal year. And indeed, significant progress has already been made towards realizing this vision. Over the last fiscal and calendar year, I've met with many First Nation partners and communities, including leadership at Pimachikamak, knowing the legacy of our past developments and our reconciliation efforts with Indigenous communities are important. Reconciliation is a critical aspect of our business, which will continue. Before I close, I'd like to say thank you again to our employees. They make us proud. Much is asked and expected of them every day, and every day they deliver, often despite very difficult and challenging conditions. Most importantly, they do so safely, which is a top priority for me, my executive team, and every single employee at Manitoba Hydro. Thank you to the members of the committee for your time. Thank you to our past board chair, Ben Graham, for his time and guidance over the last year and a half. And congratulations once again to our new board chair, Jamie Wilson. And I look forward to your questions on our 2024-2025 annual report.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. The floor is now open for questions. Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and I'd like to thank the CEO for those remarks that begin to paint a picture of exactly what the Crown Corporation is all about, and that's what we're here today to help answer any questions Manitobans have when they see the piling debt, but yet concerns of the potential of rate increases, seeing as though we have some of the lowest electricity rates in the entire country. These are things that that encourage Manitobans to defend and support the Crown Corporation that allows us to enjoy those those privileges. But according, as was led to by the CEO, according to the latest filing with the PUB, Manitoba Hydro is calling for an annual rate hike of 3.5% or a 40% increase over the next 10 years. My question to the board and the CEO is whether or not that will generate enough funds to support Manitoba Hydro's business.
Minister Sala.
Thank you so much, Chair. Happy to answer the question and, of course, offer our CEO an opportunity to provide some commentary on this question as well. First thing I just want to make sure we're clear about is that the GRA was only for 3 years. And so the request was 3.5 over 3 years, not to 10 years, as was stated by the critics. So very important to be clear about that. And the reason why we brought that forward, of course, is to ensure that we come forward with a balanced approach of ensuring that Hydro can meet its financial obligations while we keep rates affordable for Manitobans. And that's a critical priority for us as a government. I think we've done a lot to help ensure that we keep hydro rates affordable. And one of the ways we were able to support keeping hydro rates affordable, as the critic might know, is that we brought in an elimination of the capital tax that hydro was paying previously, and we reduced a debt fee that ultimately saw an estimated $200 million more remain in hydro than had previously been left there. And what that did is that helped to allow, depressurize to some extent, those rate requirements so that hydro, again, could continue on a path of ensuring that we meet Manitobans' energy needs while we keep rates affordable. So we're proud of that. And in addition, of course, we're extremely proud of the hydro rate freeze that we brought in at a critical time for Manitobans when they needed those affordability supports. So to maybe dig deeper into the question, I'd like to hand it over to the CEO to provide more commentary.
Mr. Danroth.
Mr. Chair, as the minister has outlined, Manitoba Hydro has not asked for or applied for a 10-year rate path. We've applied for 3 years at 3.5% per year. As I mentioned in my opening statements, the PUB has awarded us 4% for this year, and they are reserving their decision on the remaining 2 years until a later date. And that's simply where we're at. We're pleased with the rate increase that we did receive. We think it is needed in light of some of the cost escalations that we're seeing, really globally around the world for material and whatnot. But at the same time, we're also pleased to say that even with the rate hike, we will continue to have some of the lowest rates in North America, and I believe, subject to Mr. Fogg's thoughts, if required, that we'll have the second lowest rates in Canada.
Mr. North.
Yeah, thank you, Honourable Chair, and thank you to Mr. Danroth for the explanation. Just to clarify it a little further, I think that Manitobans all realize that this being a Crown corporation, there is a blurred line between government, the province of Manitoba, and the Crown Corporation. So when we speak of allowing more money or less money to stay in the Crown Corporation to show better or worse on the financial statement, at the end of the day, if the corporation or the province is in a position of accumulating deficit, there's only one taxpayer to pick up that tab, and that's the concern. So from my question, even if it may be hypothetical, but it had been a comment that had been made before, is that rate increase for a decade would need to be seen. So whether or not we want to recognize, hypothetically speaking, of a rate increase of 3.5% or 4%, if that was to be the case under the current business model, could the Crown Corporation be in a financially viable, which it currently isn't, and we realize that there's infrastructure that needs replacement. Some of that is, as mentioned, 20 years over its expected life cycle. If we were to continue on the path that has been presented to the PUB, would that be enough to allow Manitoba Hydro to be in a financially stable and profitable, or at least stable position?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Minister Sala.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I'd say I just want to challenge the critic on one of the comments he made, which is that Hydro is not a viable organization. I strongly disagree with that characterization of Hydro, and I think it reflects a certain philosophy or thinking about the Crown that doesn't necessarily reflect it as it truly is. I think the question, which is, of course, I'm understanding that you're wanting to get clarity as to whether or not the rate increases that have been proposed by Hydro through the GRA process are sufficient to meet Hydro's financial obligations. And the answer to that is, of course, yes. That's the entire purpose of that exercise, which is to ensure that Hydro's financial obligations and their debt servicing requirements are met through those rate increases. And that's the entire purpose, of course, of that rate-setting process, which is to ensure that we are able to service our costs, not go any further, but to service those costs with a goal on meeting those longer-term debt-to-equity ratios that we know we need to make sure that we move towards to ensure that Hydro can remain financially healthy. In terms of the debt situation that you outlined, I think the key piece that you've left out there, or that the critic has left out, is that there are corresponding assets to that debt, which produce value, of course. So that's all accounted for in the good work that's done, of course, by the corporation in identifying what rate increases are required, again, with a focus on keeping them as affordable as possible. But maybe with that upfront color, I'd invite either the CEO or the CFO to provide any further information about why those rates are set the way they are, and any further clarity on why we're ensuring Hydro's financial health and viability through the setting of those rates.
Thank you, Minister. Just a gentle reminder to all members, while during your questions or responses, please route your questions and responses through the chair, please. Mr. Danrath.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. So similar to the minister, I would challenge the notion that Hydro is not financially viable. We are a Crown Corporation. We meet regularly with our rating agencies. Certainly the rating agencies have never expressed that concern to the best of my knowledge. And again, when I conclude my remarks, welcome Mr. Fogg to add further clarity to that. You know, it's a Crown Corporation. It's a different business than if it was a pure play private business. And you have, one of the luxuries you have is you have the ability perhaps to take the debt higher than you would normally in a private business. But as we look at our, you know, our asset base of about $32 billion and our debt of around $24, $25 billion, It's certainly something that we watch and we monitor, and we have a team that looks after that and looks after the different maturing debt that we have, both the short, the long, and the ultra long-term debt. And we make sure that we're able to manage within the confines of the system in which we operate, which, as we all know, has a cap at 4%. And as we run our numbers and run our metrics, we believe that we can continue to do what we're here to do, which is to provide safe, reliable, affordable energy to all Manitobans. Mr. Fogg.
Thank you, Mr. Danrath. Mr. Fogg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what I would just add to Mr. Danroth's response is, we've discussed this extensively in front of the Public Utilities Board at our general rate applications. When we look at this, we consider any rate application and the long-term projections from really kind of a three-legged stool, if you will, and it's affordability, financial health, and being able to make system investments for reliability for Manitobans. And we take a near-term view and a long-term view. So financial health is certainly a consideration, and we're absolutely focused on a number of key financial metrics. Our capital structure, our debt is one, and there are others. But we always have to keep that in balance. We have to consider affordability for Manitobans. We also have to consider our mandate of providing safe and reliable energy and making the investments that we have to make in the system to meet that. So it's a balancing act, but we strongly believe we have the right path for Manitoba Hydro in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Fogg. Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I would then like to ask of either the CEO or the CFO if it's true that in order to pay for refurbishment projects and for a small increase in capacity, Hydro plans to increase its debt load by a further $8.6 billion.
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Minister Sala.
Thank you, Chair. So happy to provide a response to the question, and then I'd like to pass it over to Hydro to provide more commentary. So the number that was referred to by the critic relates to investments that we're making in reliability. And those investments are all contemplated within the recent GRA. So those are, of course, folded into that rate path that we put forward to Manitobans through that process. And this is to respond to reliability concerns. And within that number that was identified, there is a significant investment in bipole repair, which the member might know has been delayed for many, many years and is a critical repair that we need to ensure we begin the process of moving forward on to preserve reliability for years to come for Manitobans. The other item that I can say is part of that number is the proposed investments in CT generators. And that's to respond to, again, reliability concerns that have been created as a function of a failure of the last government to do any development of any kind for 7.5 years that left us all in a pretty tough position. So that's going to help to respond to some of those challenges and ensuring that we can bring dispatchable energy online soon to respond to the energy challenge that the last government left us. But again, this number is all inclusive as part of that GRA. So I think it's important to highlight here that while this is, of course, again, adding new debt, this is resulting in assets that we are improving or either putting in place new assets that are going to provide important reliability supports to Manitobans. And these are critical right now because, again, we were left in a very challenging position as a province by the last government where we did not see any new energy development for 7.5 years. We needed to move quickly in responding to that reliability risk. And I think one of the really important things to highlight here is that this GRA proposes, again, these rate increases over 3 years, which are reasonable. And we're doing that while we're making the kinds of investments that Manitobans want to see in moving Manitoba Hydro forward, whether it's in reliability or new supply. And one of the amazing things I think it's important to have on the record here today, Mr. Chair, is that under the former government, the rate path over their tenure in government was higher than what we're seeing under this government. But the big distinction is that under the former government, there was nothing to show for it. So we're making huge progress while keeping rates affordable. And with that, maybe I'll pass it to the CEO or CFO if they'd like to provide any further commentary around that number that was shared by the critic.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Fogg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the Minister mentioned, the $8.6 billion would represent our HVDC project as well as dispatchable capacity resources. And just as a reminder, our HVDC system transmits over 70% of the power that's generated in this province from northern Manitoba to the south to be used. And it's not just a modest investment in sustaining our system. It's the critical, really the backbone of our system to deliver energy to Manitobans and to generate revenue for Manitoba Hydro. So it's an absolutely critical investment that needs to be made. And it's being made over about a 15-year to 20-year time period. It's not an immediate $8.6 billion investment. What I would just also add is that when we talk about investments, when we look at our funds over a long term, as we talked about extensively at the general rate application, we're also always making sure we're considering how are we funding that, whether it's a combination of debt or cash. We're very mindful of making sure that not just the debt amount, but all of our key financial metrics are within the target range that we want to be or within the range that our credit rating agencies and others are comfortable with to prudently manage our finances while balancing those investments that are critical to making sure we meet the growing electrical needs of Manitobans.
Thank you, Mr. Fogg. Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Honourable Chair, my next question would again be for the CEO or CFO regarding the financial position and the reality that rates need to be increased, and that's why the proposal was made to the Public Utilities Board. And as we're hearing, it needs that needs to happen so that capacity could be growing, and that upgrades can happen. So I'd like to ask the CEO or the CFO if they feel that it was then irresponsible of the current government to claim to demand a hydro rate freeze this last year, to bring affordability as claimed to average Manitobans. We're starting to get a very clear picture as to the position of Manitoba Hydro, and that the costs of these upgrades and expansions only become more expensive each and every year. In fact, during the opening remarks of the CEO, that's exactly what we had heard. So if time is wasted each and every day, that we aren't making these improvements to the system for the financial viability of the Crown Corporation, which we all know is the viability of the government that Manitobans are responsible for servicing, then would it be the CEO and board's position that it was irresponsible to waste time in raising hydro rates?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Mr. Danroth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regards to the question on the table as to whether or not Manitoba Hydro thinks it was irresponsible, we have no comment on that. Our role as a Crown Corporation, as everyone knows, we're responsible to a board, and that board is responsible to a shareholder, which is the government. And as part of our strategy and as part of our rate setting and how we do things, we take into consideration government policy, which was encapsulated in the Affordable Energy Plan. And included in that was a rate freeze. And that was something that was debated during the election before I actually even arrived in the province. So it's not for us to comment whether we like it, don't like it, or anything. It's just a point of fact that that's what was in play. That's what an election was fought over, and a decision that was made by the electorate. And there are times that as Manitoba Hydro, we'll question certain things, but there's other times that we don't. And in this case, that's a matter of policy. Election was fought over that. It was done before I arrived here, and we just honor those types of commitments. And that's our position on that.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. Minister Sala.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chair. So I do want to provide just a couple of comments in relation to the question. The member characterized sort of the hydro rate freeze as wasting time. And I think it's probably, it encapsulates, I think, the perspective that was brought to bear during their time in government. And I think one of the concerns that the average Manitoban had was that what that perspective brought to bear was a lack of balance in ensuring that rate increases reflected the actual pressures that hydro was facing. And here we have returned to an approach where the experts, CEO, chair, CFO, who are looking at hydro's financial obligations for the years ahead, are able to assess what those needs are and are therefore able to go forward and propose a rate to the Public Utilities Board, who can play their role in ensuring that Manitobans don't pay 1 cent beyond what they're supposed to be paying or what they need to pay to allow hydro to meet those obligations. In the previous state, what we saw under the former government, which was, I think, really reflected in Bill 36, which was the last version of a bill that was brought forward, I think, multiple times over the course of many years. I think it was an extremely bad bill to begin with, and then they made it slightly less bad, and the one that Manitobans had imposed on them was still bad, but maybe not as terrible as the first version of that bill. Effectively, that bill, what it sought to do was to undermine the expertise of people in Manitoba Hydro, and it sought to replace the role of Hydro as the organization determining what its financial needs were, proposing a rate, going through a public quasi-judicial process through the Public Utilities Board, and instead had those rates set at the cabinet table. And Bill 36, effectively what it sought to do was to create unreachably high financial targets for Manitoba Hydro that would have seen them be forced to bring in 5% rate increases for the distant future. And that was a significant risk for Manitobans that, you know, again, the former government effectively sought to kneecap the Public Utilities Board and their role in rate setting. They took away Hydro's ability to identify really what their real financial needs were, and instead supplanted that with a political perspective that was focused on doing what the member has alluded to, which is effectively raising rates as quickly as possible. And we saw them do that over their many years, over the 7.5 years they were in government. They used novel approaches that Manitobans had never even seen be used before for raising rates. One example of that was when they included a hydro rate increase in a BITSA bill, which was the first time in this province's history where that ever happened. And one of the reasons that, again, that's such a big concern is because Manitobans saw a hydro rate increase there that they'll never know, because it's never been adjudicated by the Public Utilities Board, whether that rate increase was actually even required. So, you know, again, this perspective that we were wasting time when in fact, of course, what we were doing was ensuring that we met the moment and helped Manitobans during the affordability challenge that they were facing. That's the perspective that we're bringing to bear. I think this idea of that we're wasting time by not raising rates more quickly, I think is what the member is trying to convey. I think it's the wrong approach, and I think that is reflected in the approach that Manitobans said no to when they rejected their government. And ultimately, I'm proud of the work that we did to make legislative amendments to that bill that they brought in. And effectively through that, those amendments, we were able to stop 5% hydro rate increase that would have come on board last April as a function of that bill. So that rate freeze, again, was a planned rate freeze that was supported through those that elimination of that capital tax and the changes to the debt fee that were outlined earlier that left $200 million more per year with Manitoba Hydro. I'll remind the member that a 1% increase is roughly correlates to an $18 million increase in revenue. So he can do the math and figure out what leaving $200 million more in Hydro did to depressurize their rate requirements for a year. He can see that we more than supported the ability to get there without creating any type of longer term issue. And again, the most important thing here is that we did away with what I think of was the very disastrous type of model that the former government had proposed we utilize when it comes to hydro rate setting, which is setting rates at a cabinet table with people who have no expertise or understanding of what hydro's actual financial needs are. So we brought it back. We're proud of that. And again, why? Because we understand that that approach, where we trust in the experts at Hydro, and of course we trust in the Public Utilities Board, is what Manitobans want to see. So we're proud to have brought that back and I think restored an important focus on ensuring affordability while we move forward making reliability investments.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and I'd like to thank the CEO for that response. I think it was important to get that on the record, but at the same time as it was important to hear the response from the CEO, I think it's important that we hear what the minister has to say as to the role that the board of Manitoba Hydro, together with their CEO and the Public Utilities Board, has to play. It's been mentioned now a number of times by the minister, the value that is seen in the board and the CEO, and I definitely wouldn't dispute that. Very capable group. So I'd like to ask the minister if, with that being said, and the explanation for why the rates were frozen, and that it may have been politically driven. Now that we have to get to work together with the board and new CEO, is the minister willing to commit to standing out of the way for the government of Manitoba, standing out of the way of recommendations that are brought forward on managing the finances of the Crown Corporation Manitoba Hydro to allow them to propose rate increases, planning for infrastructure upgrades and improvements as they see fit without political interference.
Thank you, Mr. North. Minister Salam.
We are absolutely committed to working collaboratively with Hydro leadership, of course, through our chair, in ensuring that we keep rates affordable and that we ensure energy is reliable for Manitobans. Look, this was something that was done, again, through discussion, through collaboration, ensuring that we were able to bring those dollars, again, through the elimination of the capital tax and the debt fee, able to bring $200 million more every year to keep that in Hydro's coffers. And again, one of the biggest things that we were able to do to support that rate freeze was to make amendments to a bill that the former government had brought in that was going to see 5% rate increases yearly for the foreseeable future because of the structure and the formula that they had imposed upon Manitobans, where they were setting rates, again, at the cabinet table instead of allowing Hydro to lead that work. So I think, you know, the question being, are we supportive of ensuring that Hydro can work independently to identify their financial needs and then to bring those, you know, those requests forward? That's exactly what Manitobans can expect, and that's what they're seeing us do through the amendments, or that's what they saw us do, rather, through the amendments we made to the bill that had been put in place by the former government that was the greatest piece, I think, of interference in Hydro we've seen in this province in a very long time. So the very act of amending that legislation was, I think, in its essence, the act of returning independence back to Manitoba Hydro in that rate-setting process that the former government had taken away.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. North.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Try not to dwell on that anymore. So, Honourable Chair, we'll try to keep it rolling to get the entire picture as clear as possible for ourselves and the Manitoba ratepayers. So, pursuant to the Manitoba Hydro Act, the province unconditionally guarantees almost all the Manitoba Hydro's outstanding third-party debt. The province also provides 99% of the utilities financing through provincial advances. Does the government support Hydro raising rates on Manitobans just so that they can take on more debt?
Thank you, Mr. North. Minister Sala.
Thank you. I can confirm for the critic that we are investing to improve reliability and not just for the sole purpose of adding debt. Seems to be what he asked us.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Narth.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Chair. So with that, I'd like to know, Honorable Chair, what the yearly interest that Manitobans must pay on Hydro's existing debt. So in other words, the debt servicing costs for Manitoba Hydro.
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Mr. Fogg.
Mr. Chair, I could refer everyone to page 82 of the 2024-2025 annual report under note 7 of finance expense. The member will see that there we indicate the amount of interest that's paid on debt for both the fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2024. Of course, that number can change and vary based on a number of factors. However, you'll see it's displayed for these two fiscal years as $902 million and $863 million, respectively.
Thank you, Mr. Fogg. Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. So I guess just to clarify, page 82, that roughly $1 billion of debt servicing for Manitoba Hydro. So then moving it closer to Manitobans and their hydro bill, that is what is of most importance when we talk about hydro and making sure that we protect the feasibility of the Crown Corporation. How would that translate into a percentage of every dollar of every hydro bill issued to Manitobans? And how much of that bill goes towards paying the corporation's debt?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Mr. Danroth.
Mr. Chair, in answer to the question, how much of someone's bill that they pay goes towards the debt, what I can say at a very macro level is, depending on the year, Manitoba Hydro takes in, call it roughly $3 billion a year in revenue. Sometimes a little bit higher, sometimes a little bit less, but for argument's sake, let's just call it $3 billion. And as we've heard from Mr. Fogg, we pay just below about $1 billion a year in to service that debt. So it's roughly anywhere from 30 to 33% of all the revenue that we bring in any given year is going to service that debt. That being said, I want to be very clear, it varies by rate class. And it's not to say that every single bill payer in this province that's what's happening with the money that they put towards their bill each month, because again, there's different rate classes and different programs in place for different people. So, but at a macro level, it's roughly between 30 and 33%.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Thank you to the CEO. I'd like to thank the CEO for clarifying that. It's on par with the calculations that I had come up with as well. Again, the purpose of today is to paint a clear picture of the corporation and how it functions, how it is functioning, and the long-term viability of it. So that's why it was important to ask that question and to see that, in fact, it is 30 to 35% of the revenue that Manitoba Hydro has goes to service the debt, and many people can relate to that as they see how much principal is paid on their mortgage each month. So this ties to that reality. The corporation has said that over the next 20 years, they plan to spend $31 billion in total capital expenditures between sustaining existing assets and developing new energy resources and capacity. Would the CEO or the board be able to clarify that that is accurate?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Mr. Danroth.
Chair, could we please ask the honourable member, could you just please restate the question, because I think I might have misheard it.
Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Yes, the corporation has said that over the next 20 years, they plan to spend over $31 billion in total capital expenditures between the sustaining of existing assets and developing new energy resources and capacity. And I'm just wanting clarification if that is in fact accurate.
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Mr. Danroth.
I can confirm that the question that was put in front of us, which is over the next 20 years, that roughly Manitoba Hydro plans to spend about $31 billion in total expenditures. I can confirm that that is in fact the number that was presented at the GRA and on the record there, as well as can be on the record here.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. The reason why I ask that is because it's eerily similar to what was said 20 years ago. Over the past 20 years, 2004 to 2024, Hydro's debt-financed asset base increased by 250%, or nearly $20 billion. How much has Hydro's energy capacity increased over that period as a result of this increase?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Mr. Danroth.
Yes, Mr. Chair, in answer to that question, that previous spend resulted in a number of increases. So Kiosk at 700 megawatts, Wasquatom at 200 megawatts, an intertie that allowed us to import up to 700 megawatts, as well as we installed a third bipole separate from the existing two bipoles, which is very important in terms of security and in the face of climate change and all these other things. And then also dam rehab at Pointe du Bois and various other maintenance and rehabilitation things, some of which have led to an increase in power.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. So if Hydro had spent $20 billion over 20 years to increase capacity by 20%, is what the estimated calculation is, right? Is it accurate to say that based on the track record of this Crown Corporation, spending this proposed $31 billion, we'll see an increase in capacity of 31% or less, given the increase in inflation?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Mr. Sala.
I just want to jump in just to provide some clarification for the member. So he seems to be mixing in reliability investments with new capacity investments. So you're jumbling them together, and I don't think that is a reasonable way to frame a question, because it's confusing those types of investments. So I don't know if the member wants to reposition his question, but the premise isn't accurate, is that those initial costs are a mix of major investments, as was outlined in reliability, whether it's in bipole or otherwise, and other new investments in new generation, like new dams.
Thank you, Minister. And a gentle reminder to all members to put your questions and responses through the chair, please. Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Sure, I'd restate that. I'm not trying to mislead anyone. Just wanting to highlight the facts that we've seen a 250% growth in debt for the Crown Corporation, and we're able to increase the capacity of the corporation by only 20%. At what point is that no longer viable for this corporation? So we're talking about $31 billion needing to be invested. We can all appreciate increasing reliability and capacity and reliability of that capacity, however the minister wants to state it. But the truth of the matter is that the debt of the corporation is far outpacing the capacity that we're obtaining. And it's at an exponential rate, quite a concerning exponential rate. I'd like to know if the corporation or the minister representing this current government feels that that is a viable path forward to having a utility that's affordable for Manitobans in the long run, that's reliable for Manitobans in the long run, and whether or not the description that I've presented of that $31 billion should increase the reliable capacity, whether it goes more to reliability or more to capacity, but how much capacity will that $31 billion provide?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Mr. Sala.
Again, I think the frame for the analysis is not appropriate here, in that, again, you're mixing up major reliability investments over that period of time that you're questioning here, or that the member is asking about. So it's not reasonable to say we spent this much money over this period, it created this much debt, it only resulted in this much increased capacity. It totally ignores the major reliability investments that were made there. So I think we just need to be clear about that frame for analysis that's been brought forward. Broadly speaking, the implication from the member is that we are not managing hydro responsibly, and that ultimately Manitoba Hydro and through their leadership are not managing responsibly. Because the implication of his question is that we're somehow not raising rates in a manner that reflects Hydro's ability to meet their obligations. I would refute that. I would say we have a huge amount of confidence in the expertise and leadership at Manitoba Hydro to identify what those financial needs are. And again, they're about servicing those obligations, those financial obligations, while heading towards that debt to equity ratio target. And that is what serves as the sort of bigger frame for those decisions around what types of rate increases are required. And that rate increase path that's been brought forward, which again is focused on affordability, reflects a reasonable rate path forward that will ensure Hydro can meet its debt obligations while bending towards that debt to equity target that they need to deliver on over the long horizon. So again, the premise of the question seems to be suggesting that Hydro is an unsustainable organization that is not setting rates at a level that reflects its actual financial pressures. I refuse to agree with that argument, and I think that, again, Manitoba Hydro leadership are doing an incredible job balancing the need to invest in more reliability, invest in more generation, while we focus on keeping rates affordable. So the rate path that was outlined in great detail through this GRA spells out, really, if the member's interested, I invite him to go look at the sort of the deep, all the numbers that are provided and are on the public record as part of that GRA, which clearly spell out why the proposed rate path will ensure that Hydro can not only remain as a sustainable Crown corporation that meets the energy needs of Manitobans, but that it can do that while it seeks to ensure that we deliver on those longer-term debt to equity targets that will keep the corporation financially healthy for years to come. So that's where the answer is to his question. And again, I understand that for years the Conservatives have sought to make arguments about the need to raise Hydro rates at rates that are faster than what Hydro's actual financial obligations might require. There's no question that's something they've sought to do for years. And again, we've talked about Bill 36 today. It's not a political statement to say that that bill sought to jack up Hydro rates as quickly as possible in a manner that didn't reflect Hydro's actual financial obligations or their, the cost that they needed to meet. But I can share again, and we've restored, I think, order to rate setting, and we're ensuring that we're once again supporting an independent Hydro in making those types of recommendations and decisions. We've supported an independent Public Utilities Board who are now, once again, after the amendments we made, empowered to make those decisions. And again, we have all of these experts and, frankly, brilliant people whose job it is, and I'll remind the member, whose very job it is to ensure that Hydro remains financially healthy while we meet our reliability and capacity enhancement requirements, and to do that while we keep rates as low as possible. So the entire premise of the question, I think, is misguided in that it seeks to advance an argument that Hydro is, again, we heard him say earlier, it's not a viable organization. That's what underpins this argument, and I think fundamentally that's wrong, and it doesn't reflect the organization as it is, nor the amount of expertise going into ensuring that these things are kept in balance: affordable rates, reliability, and new capacity. So with that, maybe I would offer, if interested, the CEO or chair or CFO to offer any further commentary.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Danroth.
Mr. Chair, so I just want to say at the outset that one of the things we pride ourselves on at Hydro is we really try to be as independent as we possibly can while respecting the government of the day, and just pride ourselves on working with whomever is in power and just trying to work through the issues as they come. What I can say, looking forward on this 31 billion is that over the next 20 years is you will have 750 megawatts of CTs that will be in the south where the population primarily exists in Manitoba versus the north. You will have 600 megawatts of indigenous wind, which we are not building, but we will procure, and that may open the pathway for additional wind. So if you look at the 20-year horizon and you say, what is the new generation possibility? It's quite significant. Just on those two numbers alone, it's approaching 1,400 megawatts, and depends on what we do in the future beyond that. I can also, again, and I made the point of independence at the start because I want to be very careful with what I say next. I try very hard not, Mr. Chair, not to criticize people that came in the past or previous governments or anything. But what I will say is when you look at the previous 20-year spend of many, many billions, that I could, sitting here today with the benefit of hindsight, make the argument that that spend maybe wasn't done entirely properly because the HVD system 20 years ago was at end of life. It needed to be replaced then. And decisions were made, and I wasn't here, and I'm not going to criticize the decisions that were made, but decisions were made to not do the relife of the asset then, or 15 years ago, or 10 years ago. Again, it's not my reason to question why, other than just to point out the fact that you could make the argument that that work should have been done then, and then we wouldn't have to do the work now, and we could, to the member's point, we could take this money and go do something different. But we are where we are. We have a system, as Mr. Fogg explained earlier, where our generation is principally in the north. We have three means of getting it down to the south, bipole 1, bipole 2, bipole 3, and two of them are really, really old. They are the longest tenured HVD systems arguably in the world, and by the time we finish the refurbishment 10 years from now, they will most certainly be the oldest systems in the world, and we have got to fix them. And it's painful. I assure you, I do not like spending $8 billion when it should have been spent previously to spend that money and not have any additional capacity. But the other side of it is if we don't spend the money, we'll lose significant capacity. We are here to discuss the annual report, and I'll refer to page 126, which shows our generating capacity and shows that we are maintaining roughly 6,100 megawatts of generating capacity. Great system. A hydro system that we have, as I said at the outset, is a great system. When you build them, though, they're very expensive. So if you go back in time to some of our older facilities when they were first built, I'm sure you can pull up news articles that will show that people at the time talked extensively about the expense and the cost. And because many of them last 100 years, there is a point in time, 50, 60 years, whatever that is, when you have to relife them, you have to refurb them. And again, it becomes very expensive. It's just the type of system that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. And I greatly appreciate that response from the CEO. As I've stated all along, this is to paint a picture for us and all Manitobans on the position of Manitoba Hydro, and these comments and these questions, I think, are providing exactly that. So I'd like to clarify a statement that the minister had made that I am advocating for further increases in hydro rates and mentioning that as a position that I'm taking, and that in fact is not the case at all. What I'm wanting to do is, like I've said, get the picture of the business model of the corporation so that Manitobans can understand the future viability of this corporation. And we understand when the minister talks about reliability, I think we all understand that, building any capacity needs to be reliable capacity. So whether or not the money spent, the additional debt goes towards reliability or not reliability, I think it's without being said that we'd assume we're building reliable capacity and increasing the reliability of the system. But the fact of the matter is, there's a couple ways of obtaining a position where we are in a profitable, or we can have that discussion on whether or not a Crown corporation needs to show profitability. We were just in the MBLL Crown Corporation committee, where we see another Crown corporation of this province is in a quite healthy, profitable position. Obviously, a lot different than providing a utility to the public, and I understand that, and all Manitobans understand that. But what we need to figure out is the long-term future and the viability of that future for Manitoba Hydro, because as we see that we're needing to expand the debt to build the capacity that's needed and to refresh that capacity, because it's going to be the oldest in the world, as stated, which I 100% believe, we are needing to either change the structure, increase rates, or be able to build some type of a market that can create future financial profitability. So I guess to wrap that part of my questions together, I'd like to ask the CEO, the future plan for Manitoba Hydro's financial viability. Would that mean that Manitoba ratepayers may need to pay more, and it's a realistic ask to pay more, or can we find markets to sell our product so that we can build the capacity there and the financial profitability, or is it a structural change? But I don't know why I even would need to be explaining this to the finance minister of our province, but I don't care if it is the balance sheet for our personal income and our household position, a small business, a farm within Manitoba, or a Crown corporation. It needs to be financially feasible. And this corporation is going to obtain that through three different paths. So my question would be, which one of those do we see as the most attainable in the future?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Minister Sala.
I just want to ask the critic just to clarify, when he says which one of those is attainable, can you clarify what paths you were referencing, or you seem to be suggesting there are three? Could you highlight them again for the table?
Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to clarify for the minister, those three would be a rate increase to the Manitoba user, if that's our only market or our main market. The other would be a structural change in management, as we often see businesses structural change to increase efficiencies in the profitability, or a sales market that's able to generate new income for the corporation.
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Minister Sala.
Just for further clarification, does the member mean privatization when he says structural change, or can you help provide some clarity? What could that mean other than some form of privatization? Help us understand that.
Thank you.
Just so we can better answer the question.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Narth.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Chair. No, I'm not speaking to privatization. It would be just the structure of either, whether it be management, structure of delivery. So as you're upgrading these generation stations and the lines, if there's efficiencies that can be found so that we can provide the electricity to those in the south, as has been explain that's where the customer base is. If there could be structural changes within the corporation to more efficiently deliver the sale of our utility to the users in southern Manitoba. So like I say, I don't see there being another option. There's sort of three ways of addressing this. There's one of three. If there's a fourth or a fifth potential solution to the situation that we're in, I'm all ears, but I think it's one of those three, and which of the three does the corporation view as the path forward?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Minister Sala.
Okay, thanks so much to the chair and thanks to the critic for the question. So again, the premise of the question seems to be that there's concerns about viability, which, and he's asking, what are we going to do about it? And I think the answer has been clearly laid out in a 10,000-page GRA submission. So there's lots of information that he can find there that summarizes sort of Hydro's current theory of the case as to how we're going to move forward while meeting our energy needs, ensuring reliability, and keeping things affordable. As far as the structural change that he suggests, you wanted to get some information about, I would say there, it's assumed that Hydro has organized itself in a way that ensures maximum efficiency for Manitobans. I'll, of course, invite the CEO to talk about that structure and whether he sees any other further opportunities to alter that to support any further levels of efficiency. But at this point, I mean, again, we as government have trust that Hydro has organized itself to ensure efficient delivery of services to Manitobans. As far as the use of further external markets, which seemed to be another path that the member had identified, as he would know, Manitoba Hydro already works in a number of markets in the U.S. And of course, Manitoba Hydro balances the sales of that energy against ensuring that we have the energy we need to meet the needs of Manitobans, and uses some of the profitability there to ensure that we can keep rates affordable for all of us. And so I think, again, we'll invite Hydro to talk about that, whether they see further opportunity, but that's kept in careful balance, again, against ensuring that we can meet our own energy needs. And then, again, the question of rate increases. Will there be rate increases to help support Hydro's financial health? We have identified exactly what those are in the GRA. Again, it's a 3-year path proposed at 3.5%. And those proposed rate increases, again, are supporting significant investments in increasing capacity and reliability over the next 3-year horizon. And again, are focused on keeping a close eye on those longer-term debt-to-equity goals. And so that reflects, I think, the work of the experts leading Hydro and their overall thinking and theory of the case as to how do we build more, create more reliability, keep rates affordable. We have trust in that. And I think, again, the question presupposes that things are not going well, or that the things are in a state of disrepair, or something's not headed towards the right goal. I would argue that that's exactly what the folks on this side of the table are working on each and every day and are expert at. And I think that we've put forward, to answer the member's question at the highest level, the path forward is outlined in the GRA and will also be outlined in the IRP, which the member can expect to see more and hear more about in the months to come. And I think, those two pictures, I think, provide a very clear sense of how Hydro and our government is moving things forward, finally, after years of stasis and a failure to build any new energy while increasing hydro rates at a rate that exceeds the path that we've put forward here. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the Hydro CEO if he's interested in providing more comments.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Danroth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the member noted, there are some levers that we can pull at Hydro, but I'll start by saying that the thing that guides our work each and every day is really three things, which is affordability, safety, and reliability, and we balance all of that against our debt. When you look at the organization and you look at the income statement, any company's income statement, there's a couple of levers that you can pull. One is obviously rates. And in regards to pulling the rate lever, we just went through the GRA and many, many weeks of testimony, about 10,000 pages of submissions to different interveners, and answered all sorts of questions, both myself and Mr. Fogg and our CEO, Hal Turner, as well as others. So I think our idea on rates is very, very well documented. To the member's point, there are some other levers that we can pull, one of which is restructuring debt, which is something that I mentioned earlier, and it's something that Mr. Fogg and his team do all the time. As debt comes due, we're constantly looking at what we can do to shift our debt around to save money and improve our cash position. We can look at our export markets. We do actively trade in our export markets. That's another lever that we can pull, and we're always looking for ways to optimize that and seeing if there's trends and opportunities within MISO for us to do more there. And then in terms of a structural change, which I understood with the back and forth between the minister and the member, we're not talking about privatization, but it seems like what we're talking about is organizational restructuring and other efficiencies, or as it's commonly known as austerity measures. What I will say is that the organization, for really going back over a decade, has essentially been in austerity measures. When anytime you look at rate submissions and then subsequently finding that the PUB is only going to give you, say for instance, 1% increase or something, that by itself causes us to look inward and look at our expenses. It's a constant thing that we're doing. The new SAP project, which is one of our goals that I mentioned at the outset, is going to allow us better than ever before to really look into our $31 billion organization with 5,000 employees. And once it's live, really put a sharper pen on things and really try to understand all of our spend and analytics and get into some more sophisticated analytics with Mr. Fogg and his team to try to find ways to continue to find efficiencies. That being said, we're not waiting for that. We're always looking for efficiencies anywhere where we can find them.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. Ms. Stone.
To see you all again this year. Good to see you in person. That's right. Last year, unfortunately, there was the weather and the roads were all closed. So yes, it is great to be here in person this year. I do have a couple of quick questions as regards to the GRA and the rate increases that Manitobans are seeing. So Manitoba Hydro regularly confirms and highlights the need to have predictable, stable rate increases in order to remain viable. Part of the reason of doing multi-year is to provide a bit of that predictability and stability for ratepayers as well as Manitoba Hydro's customers. So if the CEO could please again confirm, had the government not interfered with the rate freeze last year, that the plan would have been to request a 2% rate increase, as was determined by that multi-year rate increase process.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Minister Sala.
Thank you so much, Chair, and I appreciate the question from the critic. Good to see her too. Welcome back. I'm happy to speak to the hydro rate freeze, which we were very proud to bring in to support more affordability for Manitobans. And I think one of the important things to highlight as it relates to the rate freeze was that this was a measure that was taken to prevent ultimately a 5% rate increase that Manitobans were destined to receive under the Bill 36 formula that the former government had brought into play. That bill, as I've talked about here earlier today, sought to determine hydro rates at the cabinet table. And it did that through implementing a formula that was fundamentally disconnected from hydro's financial needs and instead just really brought forward a formula that seemed to have been written on the back of a napkin that led to 5% rate pressures year over year into the distant future. So again, knowing when we came in that that was a significant risk, and of course we did make a commitment to Manitobans in the election that we were going to bring in a hydro rate freeze. We first started by making legislative amendments to that bill that had been brought forward by the last government that again took away the role of the Public Utilities Board and hydro as being the key drivers of determining what those rate needs were, and instead placed that in the hands of political figures around a cabinet table. So the first thing we did is we made those legislative amendments. By virtue of doing that, we eliminated this 5% rate increase that Manitobans were going to see imposed upon them last April. So that was the first important piece to support that rate freeze. The second piece was that we brought in an elimination of the capital tax and a debt fee that hydro was paying to government. So we talked about that a bit earlier today. The total amount of money that ultimately those changes left back within hydro was approximately $200 million. So as a result of that decision, hydro had $200 million more that stayed in the corporation. And again, a 1% increase in 1 year is roughly equivalent to about $18 million. So I'll let the member do the math about what that meant in terms of the additional dollars that we were able to leave with hydro over that same period that the rate freeze was brought in to ensure that hydro could remain fiscally sustainable and that they were able to continue doing the important work that they were doing. All of this was brought forward with a longer-term view, again, of ensuring that as government we work to keep rates affordable. We did that, I think, by virtue with the elimination of the capital tax and the elimination of that debt fee. We helped to again, depressurize the situation to a certain extent. That's something we're proud to have done. And that helped fundamentally to keep rates affordable and it really underpin our ability to bring forward a hydro rate freeze. And so, you know, following that freeze, again, we're proud to have brought forward a rate path that I think is fundamentally affordable. And as I said earlier today, is actually more affordable than the rate increases that the former government brought in over their tenure, with the major distinction being that we're actually building things and we're actually getting things done and moving our province forward. So we had many years there under the PCs where Manitobans were effectively seeing, again, a higher rate path, or they were seeing a higher rate path than we're currently on, and yet we saw no development of new energy capacity. We saw no new major reliability investments. We talked earlier today about the importance of bipole and how important it was that we moved to start making progress on that incredibly important bit of infrastructure that brings that energy down to southern Manitoba. Last government didn't make one step in that direction. And so there was like a seeming indifference towards ensuring that Manitoba could ensure that we had the reliable energy we needed and that we were ultimately going to have the energy we needed to support our businesses and our citizens to turn their lights on and build things and grow our economy. And so very proud of the work that we've done in keeping rates affordable. Again, proud of that hydro rate freeze that the member's asking about. I think there's no question we've done this in a way that protects our overall fiscal position here for hydro, while ensuring, again, we're able to continue moving forward in building out the reliability and new capacity that we so desperately need after 7.5 years of PC leadership.
Thank you, Minister. Ms. Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with all due respect to the minister, his rate freeze has now led to a 4% rate increase on Manitobans, which isn't exactly affordable during a cost of living crisis and the affordability challenges that Manitobans are seeing today. So further to my question to the CEO and CFO directly, I believe I asked this question last year, and I think you did confirm that it would have been 2%. Other factors at play is what that multi-year rate increase would have predicted for last year had there not been a rate freeze. So under the assumption that that would be operating at about $40 million, as the minister has said, 1% is around $18 million, so let's say $40 million, give or take. So Hydro has operated at a $63 million loss last year, $409 million loss this year. So as a result of that rate freeze, how much fiscal pressure has now been deferred onto Manitoba Hydro as a result of that rate freeze this past year?
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Minister Sala.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to talk more about the important rate freeze that we brought in to support Manitobans and why it was a really important commitment that we made. And ultimately, to help the member understand, I'm happy to repeat some of what I offered in the last answer, which I'd hoped would help her see why this initiative ultimately was supported through government investment, through the elimination of that capital tax and that debt fee. The other thing I just want to comment on is she stated at the beginning of her question that she felt that our government was bringing forward 4% rate increases. That's not accurate. The Hydro brought forward, and we supported 3.5% increases over 3 years, which again is all reflected and outlined in the GRA documents that of which there are many. We know that the Public Utilities Board identified, and I think this is largely driven by a historic drought that we've had this year, that perhaps in the interim a 4% was needed, given the drought that Hydro is facing this year. That's interim, that's going to change, and of course the pub is committed to coming back on that interim rate request. So again, to be clear and to correct the member, it's very important that to say that we did not bring forward a 4% rate path. And in fact, the broader claim that somehow we've created some kind of a rate pressure is just simply patently false. When we came in, again, we've worked very closely with Manitoba Hydro to understand their needs, to understand their view of how we needed to move forward to ensure that they had the rates to support their obligations. We worked to ensure that we worked supportively to help them meet those needs. And we did that while we helped to depressurize, again, some of those challenges with those changes to the capital tax and the debt fee. So that's an example of how our government has done the exact opposite of what the member is seeking to try to argue here today. And that's because we understand the importance of ensuring that Hydro is financially healthy. We've supported them and have worked, again, closely to ensure that the financial needs that they've identified could be met through reasonable incremental increases to rates for Manitobans. And again, the last thing I'll remind the member of, because again, they're arguing here today that that these rate increases are somehow far in excess of what they might otherwise be, or she's perhaps arguing that they're high. I'll remind her they're lower than what her government had over the course of their 7.5 years in power. And ultimately, and this is, I think, the thing that always shocks Manitobans when we talk about this and when we have a chance to speak openly and transparently about what happened over 7.5 years of their leadership, those rates were higher than what Manitobans will be paying over the tenure of this of our government, and there's nothing to show for it. Other than, again, there's no new reliability investments, no new major capacity. So they raised rates at higher levels than we have, and they didn't produce any new capacity, not a single new megawatt. They didn't start on that bipole repair, which we've heard today was essential to ensure that we could have that long-term reliability. So we really had, to a large extent, a negligent approach to overseeing Hydro and ensuring that it could continue to meet the needs of Manitobans. That's their record. Our record is about moving forward, and I'm very proud of the work that's happened over the last 2 years. Again, under the former leadership of Chair Ben Graham and the CEO, and now our new chair, we continue to get hydro, I think, back on a focus on reliability and affordability. And I'm not going to lie, like when we came into government, it became clear that failure on the part of the last government to act did create some challenges, and that we knew we had to act fast to move forward in responding to this challenge. And I think we've done that in very short order, starting by bringing in the Affordable Energy Plan, which was our broad stroke energy policy that I think set the direction broadly for hydro, and we're delighted about the progress that's being made on that, again, in coordination with the hydro leadership and their team, and starting to move us forward in a number of important areas of energy policy. But of course, in the IRP, which is going to be Manitobans will learn more about in the months to come, that will set our broader path forward in terms of developing new capacity. And of course, the associated development plan with the IRP spells out the proposed path forward. So excited to again show Manitobans more of that progress that's being made. Excited for them to learn more about how we're proposing to start that work of ensuring we have more capacity. We've already, of course, announced 600 megawatts of wind energy in partnership with First Nations, and the Métis Nation of Manitoba, which is I think a very exciting path forward in ensuring that we can meet our energy needs while moving forward with economic reconciliation and creating tremendous opportunities for First Nations and the Métis Nation here in Manitoba. And so that path forward, again, will become clear, the broader path forward beyond the 600 megs of wind. We heard the CEO allude to it a bit earlier. More of that's to come forward in the months to come. And we're going to do that work while we protect hydro's financial health and while we ensure that rates remain affordable. So I think we're balancing these things in a very good way and in a way that Manitobans haven't seen for a very long time.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Danroth.
Yes, Mr. Chair, as I said earlier in my testimony, I really don't want to speculate on what might or might not have been with or without the rate freeze. The fact of the matter is, an election was waged over a number of issues, that being one of them, and it became a matter of policy, and our role is to follow policy and implement the policy that's brought forward. What I will say, and we are here to discuss the annual report, and so I think it's wise perhaps to refer back to the annual report on page 26. And on page 26, really that graph highlights the issue that we're faced with here at Manitoba Hydro, which is that in 3 of the last 4 years, we have not been able to come anywhere near meeting our average generation. We're in a severe drought 3 of the last 4 years and far below what our average generation should be. And that really is the issue. It's just drought. We are suffering the effects of drought. It's unfortunate. We are managing the system as best we can to meet the needs of Manitobans as well as meet the needs of our export requirements and just be the good stewards that we can of the organization.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. Ms. Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My next question is for the board chair. Congratulations on your new position as well. Can the board chair please inform the committee who the chair of the audit committee is on the board?
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the question. For sure. I'll take this opportunity first, just I want to highlight, since it's my first opportunity to speak, to thank Ben Graham and his past contribution to the board. He was, it's big shoes for me to fill to come in after Ben. Fantastic leader. Specifically to the question, the Audit and Finance Committee is still technically chaired by myself until we have a first board meeting. And then we will have to, we have a person, I can say who it is, like that. Yeah, so we'll be appointing Mala Sakdiva to the role of Chair of the Audit and Finance Committee. Mala's former, she sits on the board now, she's former Deputy Minister, CPA, former Deputy Auditor General of Manitoba, highly qualified for the role. She already sits on the committee. Really looking forward to working with her in that role, but we can't appoint her until we have the official governance process that the board practices. So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Dunn.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for that answer. Last year during committee, I had asked for a skills matrix of board standard part of board governance, and a year later, I'm still waiting for it. So understanding that there's been some changes within the board itself, but the skills matrix should still, maintain that level of governance. So are you able to provide that today? And if not today, within the next week or 2 weeks?
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. I can provide to the committee that we can provide bios to the committee and that we are working on a matrix that's being updated right now through the governance committee.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Stone.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to receiving that once it is complete. Just switching gears a little bit, the Premier has repeatedly been on record, this question is for the CEO, the Premier's been repeatedly on record saying that Manitoba has enough capacity, yet Hydro in the past has said that we need more capacity and that we are essentially will run out of capacity within the next kind of 10-year time frame. In your remarks to my colleague's question, I believe you mentioned again the need to have additional capacity. So I can understand why Manitobans are a bit confused right now as to what Manitoba actually needs when it comes to Manitoba's capacity needs. So if the CEO could just explain to the committee, what is it? Do we have enough capacity, as the Premier has said, or do we need additional capacity for Manitoba's needs within the next 5 to 10 years?
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Mr. Danroth.
I believe the minister and I had a race and we put our hands up at the same time, so I believe I defer to him, actually.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. Minister Sala.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the CEO for that. I can share that in relation to the position that we find ourselves after 7.5 years of the last government's leadership, or when it comes to Hydro, perhaps a failure to lead here. They unquestionably put us in a position where we had to move with purpose when we came in to bring forward a new energy policy and to work very quickly to bring forward an IRP that could be done, again, with the highest level of quality. We had to move very fast. And that's because, again, for 7.5 years, we didn't develop one single megawatt. And so that, that's something we talk a lot about in the House. So it's something that, of course, the members would probably prefer. I don't continue to say over and over. They've, I'm sure, heard it many times. But it unfortunately is the truth. And so we were left in a position where there was something of an energy crunch that had been created as a function of their failure to develop new energy. I think when we talk about the path forward, to be clear, Manitoba Hydro has energy as part of its reserves that currently in the years ahead are slated for economic development type purposes. So when the Premier talks about us having energy to help support economic growth, there is an allocation within the planned path forward that will ensure that we can grow over the next few years. However, the issue becomes in the low 2030s. That's when we really know that we needed to move with intent to start to plug the hole that had been created by the former government. And that's why, again, when it comes to the wind energy that we'd announced, that's 600 megawatts of wind in partnership with First Nations and the Métis Nation, we're wanting to see that energy come online as soon as possible, of course. I know Hydro is working incredibly hard through that process and have done an incredible job moving that forward. I think the first RFQS is closing very shortly. That'll take us to an RFP process later, where we'll get the first round of folks coming in, and then there will be another RFQS later. So making really great progress and moving forward, again, with intent on the wind side. We're already, as government, we've acknowledged the importance of moving forward with some CT generation. Again, it was identified earlier by the CEO that we're going to be bringing in 750 megawatts of new.
Thank you, Minister. Emily Pankratz.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there would be agreements around the table for a 10-minute recess.
Is there a will for a 10-minute recess?
Can we allow the CEO to conclude his remarks and then agree to recess?
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Mr. Danroth.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd just like to have a couple of minutes with my team to confer and see if we want to add anything additional.
Thank you. Sure. Mr. Danroth.
Mr. Chair, in addition to what the minister said, I'd just like to add a couple of quick points, if I may. So, I just want to reassure everyone that we have the capacity and the energy right now that we need to meet our needs. However, we operate in a world of very long timelines, and we see out in the distance, based on the changing consumption patterns that we're seeing in the grid, not the least of which is the advent of EV vehicles. We see a pitch point, and that pinch point and the things that we're doing about that are really laid out in great detail in the IRP, which will be released in the not too distant future. And so I would really refer to that document as being the document that will guide us going forward for really for the next 20 years.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. So I'll put the question again. Is there agreement to have a 10 minutes break?
Agreed.
Agreed, and so ordered. We would be back in 10 minutes. Timer is on
At 3:25.
at 3:25.
You're not going to use your hand.
Will the Standing Committee on Crown Corporations please come to order?
Okay, Mrs. Stone.
Mrs. Stone.
Thank you. Last year in committee, we asked quite a number of questions about the legacy contracts to Minnesota. And so I'm just wondering if the CEO could walk through what that process looks like now, how much capacity is coming back to Manitoba with the cancellation of those legacy contracts, and just, I guess, a bit of an understanding that the legacy contracts that were they being canceled, not renewed, as some of them were coming to an end of their agreement anyway? So if you could just walk me through where those legacy contracts with Minnesota currently sit.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Minister Sala.
Thank you. Just want to ask the critic just to restate the question, just to make sure I'm answering it properly or we're answering it properly. Can you just, again, just outline exactly what it was you wanted to learn about?
Ms. Stone.
Yeah, thank you. So the legacy contracts that we have with Minnesota and I believe North Dakota, the Premier had announced that they would be canceling some of those contracts of delivering power to those states with the challenges that we have seen with tariffs and what's happening in the US there. So I guess I'm just curious as to how that process is going, how if those legacy contracts were coming to an end of the agreement and just not renewed, or if they were full out canceled, and then how much additional power capacity will that bring back into Manitoba with the cancellation of those contracts?
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Minister Sala.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to the critic for the question. So one thing I'm happy to share is that all contracts are outlined online. You can find them on the Hydro website. I know we can get more clarity as to exactly where they're located, but they are, there's public information outlining those contracts that are currently in place. In terms of what's happened over the last year, we have seen two contracts be ultimately come to a close that are seeing us return an estimated 450 megawatts back to Manitoba. And I think one of the important things I want to add here is, you know, these contracts provide us with really significant opportunities. Specifically, one thing I'm happy to talk about, and I'd invite Hydro, maybe perhaps the CEO or CFO to talk further about this, but it's the importance of seasonal diversity agreements. So Manitoba Hydro is able to take advantage of relationships, I think usually with US customers, that see us providing them with our excess energy in the summer when we have a lower need for those megawatts. And in the winter, see us getting an arrangement where we're able to bring in energy from those jurisdictions to our advantage. Those relationships can significantly depressurize the need for new resources and ultimately help us to deal with our peaking issue, which is to say that thanks to those agreements, we're able to help ultimately defer the need for new investments in capacity. So it can be a really, really advantageous type of arrangement, and I'm happy to maybe pass to Hydro to talk a bit more about how those seasonal diversity agreements can benefit us, or more broadly, if they'd like to speak to the question. But I think that's a fair summary of, I think, our use of these contracts and some of the ways that Hydro uses them to help to reduce rate pressure and keep rates affordable for Manitobans.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Danroth.
Yes, Mr. Chair, in addition to the comments supplied by the Minister, I'd just like to add that you know, our export contracts, and in particular our seasonal diversity agreements, are a really important part of our overall system management. As the Minister mentioned, in times of abundance, it allows us to help out our friends in MISO, given that they're a summer peaking load, and of course in times of great chill and frost here in Manitoba, where perhaps we're struggling, it allows us to have certainty that we can bring some megawatts back across the border to help us out in the reverse. So key part of our system, you know, being the only Canadian province as a part of MISO, MISO being a system that extends throughout the mid-continent all the way down to the far south of the US, governing 14 or 15 states. So it's really important for us to be a part of that. It helps keep a stable system for us going forward, and allow us to manage the system without having to incur costs to add a new generation unnecessarily, when we can rely on the seasonal differences between our two jurisdictions.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. Ms. Stone.
Okay, thank you for that answer. I appreciate that. Just switching gears a little bit, this question is for the CEO on Hydro International. How many contracts has Hydro International landed?
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Minister Sala.
Thank you, Chair. So happy to provide maybe some information and pass it over to the Hydro CO or CFO to fill in any gaps. But as it relates to MHI, I just want to take a moment to share that this is, I think, one of the things that we can be really proud of as a government, that we relaunched along a course in partnership with Manitoba Hydro International. Manitoba Hydro International, as folks might know, was, I think, something that as a province, we can just be incredibly proud of. It's a subsidiary, of course, of Manitoba Hydro. That frankly is like just an absolute hub of innovation, has produced some amazing work over the last many years, and of course did a lot of really important work doing international consulting in markets around the world. And the best part of that, of course, beyond the fact that it creates really interesting opportunities for Hydro employees to go abroad and learn new skills and perhaps make Hydro into an even more enticing place to go work, were the profits that it generated for Manitoba Hydro. So we know that Hydro in the international consulting business, in the software business, it had a number of lines of business that again produced yearly profits that were able to go back to ensure a healthier Manitoba Hydro. And unfortunately, for reasons that are beyond my understanding and the understanding of anyone I've spoken with, for whatever reason, the former government decided to shut down the work of Manitoba Hydro International. And that decision, I think, was a negative one on many, many levels. First of all, one of the impacts was that we shut down this profit hub. So we had effectively this golden goose that was, again, creating profits for Hydro, but was also making Hydro into an even more exciting, attractive place to work. So if you were an engineer, you were thinking about coming to work for Manitoba Hydro, suddenly you had the opportunity not only to perhaps serve Manitoba Hydro, which is, of course, a world-class Crown Corporation energy business, but of course this amazing subsidiary that would allow you to perhaps, if you want, go to countries like Cote d'Ivoire or otherwise to go bring our incredible knowledge here in Manitoba to other countries to support energization and energy reliability abroad. So they cut Manitoba Hydro International. That again resulted in that loss of that productivity, of that innovation that was happening there. And another, I think, significantly negative impact from that was the impacts on the expansion of broadband in Manitoba. One of the subsidiaries of Manitoba Hydro International was Manitoba Hydro Telecom, which got caught up in some of the work of the last government in shutting down MHI. And ultimately what they did was they removed Manitoba Hydro Telecom, which again was a subsidiary of MHI, in playing a role in connecting last mile ISPs, Internet Service Provider businesses, to ensure that we could expand broadband in northern, rural, and First Nations communities. And because of that decision, I would argue that the last government actually put broadband expansion in rural and northern communities at a complete and total standstill for almost 2 years. In the process, they also killed a number of businesses throughout rural and northern Manitoba, Internet Service Provider businesses, who, if you talk to them, were incredibly proud of their partnerships with Manitoba Hydro Telecom, proud of that work, and would constantly acknowledge Manitoba Hydro International and Manitoba Hydro Telecom as phenomenal partners in the work of expanding access to broadband around Manitoba. So multiple major impacts as a function of that. And then I think one of the worst pieces of that decision was that I think Manitoba Hydro International, and I would invite the team to correct me, but I think it was somewhere around 80 to 100 employees at the time it was shut down. I know that a significant number of those individuals, due to the shutting down of MHI, we lost those people to Stantec in Calgary or whatever in Toronto. That talent, that really amazing talent, had to go abroad because, again, the former government decided to shut that down. So a really bad decision, unfortunately, and I think that's highlighted by over the last 2 years while Manitoba Hydro International was shut down. And again, I'm going to invite Hydro team to comment or confirm this, but there were 30 separate contracting opportunities that were identified as having been missed as a result of that. And what I'm very happy to share is that since they're having been reestablished, there are now 4 contracts that have been, I think, put in play. More to come. I think Hydro is actively working to continue to rebuild Manitoba Hydro International. Again, I'll invite the team to speak about what's been happening on the ground. But I know that over the last year, they've been doing that good work of standing up MHI once more. And again, we can be really proud about the innovation and the work that's done there. And so with that, I'd like to invite the team to maybe speak to the question.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Danroth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a bit of background, then I'll provide a specific answer to the question. So Manitoba Hydro International resumed operations of its international consulting business, Manitoba Hydro International Utility Services, following the announcement on July 29th, 2024. This year, MHI began the process of reinstating the full scope of MHI US operations, bidding on energy projects around the world in fields such as technical and advisory services and international power line technician training, as the minister has reported. Since the resumption of operations, MHI US has won 4 contracts since November. The reestablishment to date has created 6 positions that have been added as a result of the resumption. And it's an additive thing we view to the overall business because it allows us to share our expertise globally and provide support through energy management consulting. MHI itself delivers an annual net income of about 6 to 9 million. With resumption of operations, MHI US is anticipated to increase the annual net income that MHI delivers once it gets its feet under itself.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. Mrs. Stone?
Okay, thank you. Switching gears again, as unfortunately I will have to leave here in a few minutes. Last year I had asked the CEO questions about whether Manitoba Hydro was looking at any nuclear opportunities in terms of renewable energy. As we've seen, Saskatchewan and Alberta are going very, very heavy into this space. Ontario very much is. Manitoba has natural geological benefits for our geological suppositories to put in waste, being in the Canadian Shield. We don't get earthquakes, don't really get tsunamis like in other jurisdictions, so there could be possibly potential for Manitoba in that space. So I'm just wondering if you could provide an update as to where Manitoba Hydro is at on a strategy for nuclear, or if there is a strategy at all.
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Mr. Danroth?
Yes, Mr. Chair, in answer to the question, so in terms of our IRP as it stands currently, the way the IRP is structured, it runs over 20 years. The first 10 years are pretty well set, and then the back 10 years are a little bit more speculative. We continue to monitor the nuclear landscape. In particular, what's happening in Darlington and Ontario, as well as what's happening with Tennessee Valley Authority, and then also what's happening with Saskatchewan. As the member pointed out, Saskatchewan and Alberta have moved quite ahead quite rapidly. And we're watching that as the provider of affordable, reliable, safe energy. We don't want to be on the bleeding edge or even the leading edge. We don't want to be serial number 1. We probably want to be serial much later and only with the buy-in of the board and the shareholder of the day, whomever that ends up being. So it's a situation that we monitor. We stay in close contact with Sask Power. They've stood up a nuclear division and are working very closely with Tennessee Valley. We'll continue to monitor that, and when we feel it makes sense, we'll bring that forward to our board and ultimately to our shareholder for discussion and decision around what we do. So I wouldn't say that we don't have a strategy, but what I would say is that we're aware, we're watching very closely, and we'll continue to monitor, and we'll pivot when we need to pivot to do what's best for the people of Manitoba.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. Ms. Stone?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And as I mentioned, and as you've mentioned, other provinces are really being aggressive in this space. So, it would be good to see at least some kind of strategy or outlook as to what that could potentially be for Manitoba. We look at wind, we look at solar. This is just another renewable energy within this space that we certainly should not close the door on if there is that opportunity here in Manitoba. Could the CEO give an update on where Pinawa stands right now? I understand that there is some money for decommissioning, cleaning up the plant there. Where are things at with that?
Thank you, Ms. Stone. Mr. Danroth?
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer that question, but I would like a moment to consult.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, in response to the question,
Mr. Danroth?
Sorry. My apologies, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, in response to the question put forward, we can't comment on Pinawa at this time. It's not our responsibility. Again, what I will reiterate, the process, it's our second IRP. We're very excited to release this. And no plan, as I like to say, survives the initial attack. So no sooner will we release it, and then we will begin work on the third iteration of the IRP. Can't say when that will see and how long that process will take. But as I mentioned, IRPs in general in all jurisdictions tend to look at the 10-year time horizon, and then the 10 years beyond that's a little bit more speculative. So when you look at the next version of our IRP, it may get contemplated there, or it may be the one after. Again, we'll watch to see how things unfold in Darlington and see how things unfold in Tennessee Valley and see what the cost benefit is, the cost per megawatt is, and then advise the board and ultimately advise the government of the day on what we think is in the best interest of the people of Manitoba.
Thank you. Ms. Stone?
All right, thank you. And speaking of renewable energy, if the CEO could provide an update on where things are at with the 600 megawatts of wind power, how many partnerships have been created, how many groups from the private sector have come forward to partner with the Indigenous communities and those Indigenous partnerships. So basically, where are we at on that 600 megawatts of wind power?
Mr. Danroth?
Mr. Chair, we have to be very careful on this front. I'll provide some high-level comments, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Fogg to provide some additional comments as this work is coming out of his group and his team. We are in what's known as an RFQS stage. So request for qualified supplier, that stage is going to end in the next few weeks, at which point we will have a smaller group of what we would call qualified suppliers, qualified project proponents. Those project proponents will inform us as to what they think they can do in terms of both a site and a size and a timeline. And then based on a scoring template, our procurement team will make those decisions. I actually can't comment specifically on the specifics. Both myself and Mr. Fogg get held out of a lot of the details. And that's by design so that we can't sway the process one way or the other. We're very, very careful on our approach, both with the nations and with any proponents. We have had an informational day that we put on, that we had a lot of uptake on that, and a lot of people that came forward to express their interest and share information and understand ideas from what we're doing. But the process is moving along. We're excited. And we're excited by any follow-on RFP and RFQS processes that happen after that. And I will, with the chair's permission, I'll let Mr. Fogg step in and answer any other questions.
Mr. Fogg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to add on to what Mr. Danroth said and give a little bit more background, we did have what we described as a wind symposium that happened on March 19th of 2025, and that was really a kickoff to raise awareness amongst potential proponents for the wind power, and that brought together potential wind developers and Indigenous communities to hear what that process would look like and to allow them to have discussions amongst themselves around potential partnerships that would be forming. After that, there was an expression of interest process to gain further market information around how we might structure an RFP or an RFQS, as we've discussed. And then a significant milestone was reached in October of 2025 when that request for qualified suppliers was issued. And again, as Mr. Danroth talked about, that's really a process to identify who those partnerships may be that have the experience, that have already established a partnership and have the capability to take on that wind work. And that process will be closing really in the next couple of days, and we'll see the first iterations of that, and that will then proceed to issue RFPs for the next sets of calls for power. One of the other benefits really of that RFQS process, without getting into great detail, is it will allow us opportunities to onboard new qualified suppliers as we issue further RFPs. So if people aren't ready to participate today, but they develop the capabilities later, they'll still have opportunities to participate in that call for power as well.
Thank you, Mr. Fogg. Ms. Stone?
Thank you. So as you mentioned that there was a great deal of interest, is Manitoba Hydro looking at expanding that even further? If there is that much interest, will it be taken up right away, 600 megawatts, or do you guys need more, essentially is what I'm asking. Is there enough interest for that?
Thank you, Ms. Stone. A gentle reminder to put your question and responses through the chair again. Mr. Danroth.
Yes, Mr. Chair. As Mr. Fogg highlighted, so the first RFQS, it's an important first step, and then it will lead to an upcoming first round of requests for proposals, what we're calling RFP1, which will happen in and around March 2026. And then from there, we'll select proponents and begin negotiations on a power purchase agreement, again, after reviewing timelines and all the rest of this. What I can say is I will not speak for government, and again, without having spoken to the board, but what I will say is internally, we see a real opportunity here. I think we have a lot of areas that have really good wind regimes, and certainly we could see an opportunity for more going forward, but that will be a decision that will be made in consultation with the board as well as the government. And we really, as I said earlier with my comments on nuclear energy, as part of our mandate to provide safe, reliable, affordable energy, we want to walk through this versus run, and we are moving very aggressively through a timeline, actually much more aggressive than a lot of our other jurisdictions. But nevertheless, we just want to try to get the first, 1, 2, 3 installations out of the way before committing to anything further. We just really want to be very mindful and do things in a very methodical way.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. Mr. Narth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for allowing me to pick up where I left off after my colleague asked some very important questions as well. So where we left off was speaking to the investment in additional capacity, and it ties nicely into Mrs. Stone's questions. And if we look back, we see that in the past 20 years, we had some significant projects, Kiosk Dam, the Bipole 3. And my question in regards to that is, how much new debt did the Kiosk Dam and Bipole 3 cost the corporation?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Mr. Danroth?
Mr. Chair, if it pleases, with the chair's permission, I'd just like to have a consultation here before answering that question.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Fogg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what I can say is that the kiosk generating station was a project that was somewhat less than 8.7 billion. The BIPO 3 project, which was built in a similar timeframe, was around the $4.2 billion mark. The exact amount of debt for those two assets versus how much was funded from our self-generated funds, I don't have those exact number at hand, but those are the total costs of those two projects. And the way it works when we account for those projects is they're very long-lived assets. So while you incur that debt, what actually happens is you depreciate them, or you see them on your income statement, as is in the annual report, spread out over 50 to 100 years because they're such long-lived assets. And what we're seeing right now is just there is significant value that both of those assets are providing Manitobans. As we were talking about a new capacity need in 2030, having that kiosk generating station and the 700 or so megawatts that it provides is hugely beneficial to the province. And similarly with BIPO 3, we now have a second pathway out of the north to transmit over that 70% of power that we generate, which is particularly important when we're in a period where we're looking to modernize the existing BIPO 1 and BIPO 2 lines. So, those are their costs, but certainly generating a ton of value to Manitobans.
Thank you, Mr. Fogg. Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. So then, since it's valuable and we've been told that we need to invest in building capacity similarly, those two projects, since coming online, have they generated enough revenue for Hydro to cover the interest payments on the debt that was taken to build them?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Mr. Fogg.
That works is it's what you call a cost of service model, or that's how we're regulated through the legislation as cost of service. So when we go to the PUB and we submit our 10,000 pages or so, what they look through is how are we actually recovering the cost of that asset of kiosk or BIPO 3 over time from the ratepayers, and how is that spread across a residential ratepayer, or a commercial ratepayer, or industrial ratepayer. But it ensures that we recover the costs in line with the life of the asset. I can't carve out interest specifically, but the model really works that we recover those costs through that regulation with the PUB in that model as I described.
Thank you. Mr. Narth.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Chair. Back in 2018, it was estimated that our energy would be sold to the U.S. markets for an average of $36 per megawatt hour. This despite the fact that it was estimated to cost about $140 per megawatt hour to produce. What are the current numbers that we're seeing today, and how much does it cost per megawatt to produce, and at what rate are we now selling to the U.S.?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Mr. Fogg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, the rates that we have in our contracts with export customers are commercially sensitive, so I really can't discuss what those rates are. What I can tell you is, we also do have a portion of that power that's sold on the opportunity market or spot sale, if you will, which varies dramatically based on the time of day, based on the time of year. So there's a ton of different opportunities. I couldn't pinpoint a single dollar amount that comes from that market, but we monitor that regularly, and we're actively looking to sell power when it's valuable for Manitobans and for the corporation to do so.
Thank you. Mr. Narth?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, I'd like to, and again, this is to paint a picture of where exactly we're at and how much time. This isn't a short game, as has been stated. It's strategic planning on a 30-year model, as what was said, right? So what would Hydro's timeline be for building the potentially proposed new generation station? So that's the Conawapa and the new Gillum generation stations. If the need for more power was over the next 20 years, when would they be completed? Or if we were to start these projects, what is the timeline for them to be completed?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Minister Sala?
I think, as it relates to the question, I think it's important just to state we're not going to engage in hypotheticals here. And in terms of a path forward, the IRP, which effectively represents a year's worth of effort, perhaps longer, on the part of Hydro, and a lot of people internal to the organization put a lot of effort into that. That IRP plan spells out, in association with the IRP, a development plan that I think very rigorously outlines a path forward here. And I'm looking forward to the member, along with the rest of Manitobans, getting a chance to look at that plan.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Narth?
Thank you. So then the question that I need to ask is, given the life cycle of this type of infrastructure, and we could use kiosk as an example, or some of the older ones, some that are 20 years over their life expectancy, will they ever generate enough energy and revenue to justify their expense? And I guess this isn't a doom and gloom question, more so what the question is from strictly a financial standpoint, to tell Manitobans, and not to give them misconception, because we're clearly seeing that the financial viability of these projects doesn't translate into profitability on a balance sheet. And I think many can understand that and accept that, but I think right now we're giving Manitobans a misconception that this is a corporation independent of the Manitoba taxpayer, and that it stands alone, and it's our crown jewel, so it provides affordable hydro rates for us to heat our homes, provide hydro and electricity for the new age of electrification of transportation, and we have this all available to us by a corporation that we own. When in reality, the numbers just aren't adding up. So is the CEO or even the minister able to answer whether or not these projects would ever generate enough energy to pay for themselves? And if not, then are we to be more clear with the Manitoba ratepayer that this is a corporation that we need to understand needs the support of the province? It's not standalone, financially viable to service its debt without the support of the Manitoba taxpayer.
Minister Sala?
Yeah, I'm not clear on the premise of the question, but I think really at the heart of the question is, again, this assumption that hydro is, as we heard the member say earlier, not a viable organization. So the presumption is that it's a losing business. We're investing in assets that we're not able to cover the costs of through reasonable rate increases. That's the assumption that we're hearing sort of spelled out with the question is, you know, is this a losing game? And I don't know what he's inferring in terms of suggesting that somehow government or there needs to be other interventions financially. But what I can say is, as we've said earlier, the answer to his question lies in the GRA that was just put forward. And that GRA accounts for a significant amount of investment that hydro is going to be making over the years to come, whether it's from reliability through investments, reinvestment in bipole, or whether it's in new capacity, for example, supporting 600 megawatts of wind. We're doing that, and we're putting forward a rate path that is affordable and reasonable, again, lower than what the last government brought in. And those rates don't only account for, again, the need to support that new debt that's being taken on, but also have a longer term arc towards delivering on that broader debt to equity ratio. That is the heart of what the member is asking about. And ultimately, Hydro, I think, has done an incredible job here, putting together a path forward with a correlating set of affordable rate increases, again, lower than the former government, that will set us on a course to improve debt to equity ratio. And that improvement to that debt to equity ratio is at the heart of what the member is getting at, which is the corporation fiscally sustainable? The answer to that is, with the right moves and with the type of leadership we're seeing right now, a hard yes. And I think the rate path going forward, again, this shows that we can bring in affordable rate increases while hydro moves forward into a period of significant investment, while we see the longer game and we're heading towards bringing that arc to that debt to equity ratio. That's what's at the heart of what he's asking. And again, I have no question that the team in Manitoba Hydro has a very good grasp on the numbers and the analysis here that supports us being able to do what I just outlined. They've got access to all the details and, again, have the skills and capacity to deliver on that. So yes, Manitoba Hydro is a viable organization. Yes, we can continue to invest in new resources while still maintaining an affordable rate path. And that's exactly what the 10,000 pages of information that was submitted through part of this GRA process outlined. So again, I appreciate what the member's asking, but underneath all of these questions is the presumption that hydro is not a viable organization, and we refute that entirely. And again, the sustainability of the organization is outlined, the path forward is outlined in that GRA. So I invite him to examine those documents closely, examine the math closely in there. He can deliver his own conclusion or come to his own conclusions about whether he feels that information that Hydro provided to the GRA is accurate and reasonable. But that's the real meat and potatoes here that he's getting at, and the information has been made publicly available for all to see. So I invite him to look at that. I invite him to maybe have a somewhat more of a positive outlook overall on Hydro and on the skills of those who are leading the corporation, and to know that while I understand the political intent of the question, I think it undermines the value being produced by those who are leading the corporation. And I think fundamentally what it's proposing is that Hydro is somehow on an unsustainable path, when of course we know that not only as government are we intent on ensuring long-term sustainability, but I have every confidence that this team is also focused on the same.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I'd like to move on to some administrative costs in the report. And since 2022, when the NDP, or 2023, since NDP government took over, by what percentage have Hydro's expenditures on wages and salaries increased?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Mr. Danroth.
Mr. Chair, I'll refer to the annual report that we're here to discuss today, and in particular, page 41 of the report. In the fourth paragraph, in 24-25, operating and administrative expenses amounted to $755 million, an increase of $47 million or 6.6%. Compared to the previous year. The increase in operating and administrative expenses is primarily attributable to higher wages and salaries due to wage increases and an increase in full-time equivalent employees, as well as higher employee benefit costs due to an increase in vacation expense, improved benefit offerings, as well as year-over-year changes in benefit liability remeasurements. In essence, what that's attempting to say, and just to add some clarity, is we've seen a real cost escalation in some of our benefits, as have many employers across this country. Well, I'll also go on to say that Manitoba Hydro has almost 1,000 less employees than it did a decade ago. We experienced a significant reduction in staffing levels, 25% reduction from 2016 to 2022. Which impacted us greatly. The main drivers of this were the voluntary departure program, which resulted in a 15% reduction in staffing levels. So although the annual report on page 41 references some increases, I also want to get it on the record that in the years prior, there were some significant decreases when 1,000 less employees were taken out of the organization.
Thank you. Minister Sala.
I just want to add to what the CEO has offered, and maybe on the somewhat more political side, just to clarify that reduction of 1,000 employees at Hydro was done as a result of a directive from the former government. And I know that Hydro's been seeking to rebuild since then, but that put Hydro in a much more challenging position and carved, again, a huge number of people out of the organization. And glad to know that we're moving forward through that, through those challenges.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Danroth?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and just for additional clarity, some numbers here. So in fiscal year 2016-2017, prior to the voluntary departure program, we had 6,411 FTEs. This past year, at the end of the fiscal year 24-25, we had 5,490, so almost 1,000 less employees again. And, you know, I'll just say that, like most people, you know, running businesses everywhere, the complexity of our businesses and the things that we do have not gone down. They've increased, whether it's increased regulation, whether it's increased safety regulations, increased environmental regulations. You know, that's just the regulatory compact that we operate in, but suffice it to say that things are just more complex and increasingly complex year after year, and we're doing it with 1,000 less employees.
Thank you, Mr. Danroth. Mr. Narth?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Yeah, I appreciate that response from the CEO. And what I'm trying to get from this, so I've run some calculations of my own, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been an over 30% increase. And which, as we've seen, that far exceeds the revenue increases of the corporation. So, you know, similar to the Crown Corporation committee this morning with MBLL, we're again, this is another area where we're seeing expenses outpace growth in revenue. So is it fair to say that you know, there needs to be some correction in that? And I don't mean by that, and I know that this is where the minister loves to get political, but don't take it wrong from me that this isn't saying that more people need to be, you know, laid off or removed from the position, or that we need less staff, or that the pay and benefits that they're receiving aren't what is needed to be competitive. But is it viable to continually have these expenses far outpace the growth in revenue? So would I be correct that it's been a 30% increase since 2023?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Mr. Danroth.
Mr. Chair, could the member please clarify, just because I want to give as good an answer as I can, the 30% increase, can you just clarify the time frame and what numbers you're looking at? Because I'm trying to figure out in the annual report, is there a page perhaps that you're referring to in the annual report that can guide this discussion? Just any context you could give on the 30% would be appreciated.
Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I'd have to take some time as this is research that I was done in preparing for committee, but it was taking the timeline from as far back as it goes to. This would be from also the previous report, so the end of 2023, so the 2022-23 report to now the current report.
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Minister Sala.
Confirming with the critic, so to be clear, that's over 2 fiscal years? Okay.
Minister Sala.
Thank you so much, Chair. I appreciate the question from the critic. So there's a number of drivers that are informing some of these O&A lifts that are being inquired about here. And I'm going to, of course, invite Hydro to dig into some of the details. But I think it's very important that we highlight that Hydro was not left out of some of the decisions that the former government made when it came to bringing in zeros for collective bargaining processes for workers in Manitoba. And so we saw, of course, they brought in a very unreasonable approach when it came to ensuring that Manitoban workers could have fair wages for the work that they were doing in support of Manitobans. And ultimately what happened was, while perhaps in the moment there was a sense that they were reducing costs somehow, or I don't exactly know what the overall goal was, other than to just to really hit workers and reduce their ability to, again, have their wages increase in relation to CPI and ensure that they were getting fair wages. But what we can say is that ultimately those bills came due, not only for Manitoba Hydro, but for organizations across the overall broader government. And so that bill came due. Again, that was not the entirety of that lift to the ONA, but it's one of the major drivers. So we saw, I think it was 0, 0.75, and 1, which is what the former government had brought forward for workers across government writ large. Ultimately, when we came in, there was a significant amount of pressure there that had built up. Hydro, of course, leads these decisions on that employer side, and are, I think, ultimately catching up to some of the that deficit that had been created over many years of that approach to collective bargaining. So that's a major driver here, along with some other items, and I'm going to invite the CEO and team to maybe fill in some gaps there.
Mr. Danroth?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll just again draw attention to page 41, fourth paragraph towards the bottom. So again, we've seen, in addition to increases in benefits, we have done some strategic increases in FTEs, although we're still about 1,000 people below what we were previously. But we've done this in key areas such as trades training, which coming out of COVID was absolutely decimated. Additionally, we've got higher costs for cloud computing, as well as software subscriptions and other inflationary pressures. I think we can all agree that nobody's paying any less for anything since COVID. O&M is not just made of salaries and benefits, it's made of other things as well as materials, motor vehicles, supplies, and other such things. So there's a lot of things that go into that number. In terms of the question, I believe the question was asked, like, is it time to look at some sort of expense cutting, cost cutting, austerity measures, whatever you want to call it. And as I mentioned previously, we're in the middle of an SAP project. What that project's going to do is replace our existing SAP instance, which is incredibly customized and end of life, by having a out-of-the-box solution. We're going to be able to, through Mr. Fogg's team, to engage in a lot more deeper analytics and analysis and really lean on the system to help identify areas where we can create greater efficiency and cut costs and do that sort of thing.
Thank you. Mr. Narth?
Thank you, and thank you to the CEO for his response on that. I'll pivot to try to hit on some of the most important questions that I feel need some explanation and that the average Manitoban doesn't quite understand. And one of those is we keep hearing about peak demand. So could the CEO please define peak demand for the committee?
Thank you, Mr. Narth. Mr. Danroth.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Peak demand, is that moment of instantaneous demand on the system. It usually coincides with a long cold snap. It's not necessarily targeted exactly to the coldest moment of the year, but it's usually after a sustained long period. We are a winter peaking utility. For further clarity, I can add that in the previous 5 years, our peak had stood for about 5 years. And then in December, not this last December, but 13 months ago, we set a new peak, and then that had been in place for 5 years, and then about 5 weeks later, my understanding is we broke that peak again. So it's something that we think a lot about, we study a lot, we have some very technical people that look at that. And peak demand is really across the utilities is a very challenging thing because obviously there's a lot of things that are changing within the system. If you think back 20 years ago, average household had, or 20, 25 years ago, a household had a TV. And now households have 4 TVs and 2 PlayStations and 4 or 5 devices, 1 device for every person, a phone, and then additionally probably laptops for everybody. And on and on and on. And so although everything is LED and everything's efficient and changes have been made with the kind of light bulbs that we use and these sorts of things, it still remains something that always makes us scratch our head a little bit, not just us, but engineers everywhere, because it's evolving and it's changing. And of course, EVs is contributing to that. And that highlights the reason to do the SAP work that we're going to do, because that is going to allow us to put in a replacement for our customer management system, which is currently Banner, a system called Banner. And by replacing that, then we'll be able to look at our board and whomever the government is of the day and be able to say, here's a suite of offerings that we can do to help work alongside the other crown, Efficiency Manitoba, to manage demand as it comes and to work to try, our goal really, and the goal of Efficiency Manitoba is just to constantly try to shave that peak and knock that peak off and stop it in its tracks whenever it happens.
Mr. Fogg.
And maybe just to add to what Mr. Danroth has outlined, if you turn to page 123 of the annual report, I think it does a pretty good job of identifying this electrical system capability or the capacity versus what the system actually supplies. So right at the top of that table, you can see the capability or what our system, what Manitoba Hydro system has for megawatts that it can produce in any 1 year, with a maximum capability in 2025 of just over 6,000 megawatts. And you can see below that, immediately below that, what the Manitoba firm peak or that instantaneous amount that was needed on that one day or that one moment was just over 5,000 megawatts that was needed. And this gives you a good picture over time of how the capacity of the system and what Manitobans have needed from that peak need has changed. Below that is the system supply. So that's the actual use over the course of the year. So while that one peak happens in an instant in the year, you can see below how much we need to use throughout the year and how that grows and changes over time as well. I think the last thing that's important, we've talked a lot about what our needs are in the future, that need date of 2030. But it was pretty telling to me is when you look at that 2025 year under system capability and the percent change year over year, it's a sizable growth from 2024. It's almost 12% that capacity grew. So that's a major thing that Manitoba Hydro needs to consider and plan for, is to make sure that we're meeting that growing need for energy, for electricity of Manitobans.
Thank you, Mr. Fogg. Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. We've got so much more that obviously we need to ask to understand. It's complex. It changes. Obviously, it changes yearly. But there's changes that we're seeing month by month with the Crown Corporation. This last response goes to show us that also the demand on the corporation and our system is rapidly changing. It's changing quicker than we've ever seen it before. We're seeing that whether or not it's an asset to the province, being that we have the Crown utility, but electrification of transportation and further reliance on electricity demand. So it's I think really important that that Manitoba Hydro keeps us updated, keeps Manitobans updated regularly. So I'd like to put forward a motion, and that being said, that I move that this committee recommend to the Legislative Assembly that the Standing Committee on Crown Corporations be scheduled to meet quarterly to receive updates from Manitoba Hydro on their debt management reduction plan progress and their business plan to return to profitability.
Thank you, Mr. Narth. It's been moved by Mr. Narth that this committee recommend to the Legislative Assembly that the Standing Committee on Crown Corporations be scheduled to meet quarterly to receive updates from Manitoba Hydro on their debt management reduction plan progress and their business plan to return to profitability. The motion is in order, and the floor is open for questions. Minister Sala.
Appreciate the motion brought forward by the member. And I just want to say, we've had, I think for decades in this province, a process that offers the opposition a reasonable opportunity to engage directly with hydro leadership. I think that process has served us well, I guess, when I felt that it served us well when we were on the other side of this table as well. And beyond that, I think the proposal in many ways proposes to circumvent the role of the pub. The pub is there to do that important work, especially as it relates to some of the language I see in the motion, which is about debt management, effectively ensuring that Manitoba Hydro continues on that important fiscal track, which is to see us through again reasonable rate increases, head towards that debt to equity target destination over the long haul. Hydro has effectively, spelled out their case as to how we're going to get there, as we've seen with the GRA and the 10,000 pages of information that have been submitted through that process. So I don't think there's really a strong argument to be made that there's a need for more disclosure or more information we put out into the ether as it relates to this specific set of questions, which is looking further at Hydro's approach to debt management. The GRA path spells it out. And so, again, we're not going to be interested in voting for something that would see us circumvent the pub. Again, we've had, I think, a really strong process here that served parties well for decades in our province.
Mr. Narth.
Thank you, Thank you, Honourable Chair. The reason for this is that we see the time allotted by the government and an agreement through a negotiation was 4 hours today. It's hard. It's the responsibility of opposition to be the critics of the government and their departments, and in this case, the Crown Corporation. We and all Manitobans greatly value the Crown Corporation that is able to provide this very important utility to all Manitobans. There's a lot to it, though. There's a lot that Manitobans don't understand. I think there's a lot that much of government has been struggling with getting control of, and that's been outlined today. There's changes that current government and the minister had made that comment that the corporation needed to move in a different direction, at different speeds. So it's not all perfect, and neither is any corporation, and understandably this one. But we do see some very concerning stats that were provided today and through the public annual report, and everyone wants to see movement towards more fiscal, a more fiscally feasible position for the corporation, and that means debt to equity ratios improving, and in general improvements in the overall feasibility. I know the minister has concern with the terminology, that questioning the feasibility of the corporation, but we want to do our best, and we want government and the Crown Corporation to do their best to increase that feasibility from where we see it today. Comments have been made that we're on that track, and together with the approvals of the Public Utility Board. But again, stakeholders in this corporation are not the government. They are Manitobans, and this is the opportunity. Today is an opportunity for Manitobans to ask the important questions and to hear those important responses. And as we're seeing that things need to change and have been changing rapidly, not on a 20-year projected plan that is exactly laid out and seen through as planned. So I think it's reasonable that we have the opportunity to get some of these updates from Manitoba Hydro to hold everyone accountable to the progress that needs to be made, that the corporation knows that needs to be made, and that we can update Manitobans to give them reassurance in the greatly valued corporation that Manitobans are the shareholders and stakeholders in.
Thank you, Mr. North. Mr. Sala.
I do agree with the critic that Manitobans deserve information about the work that's happening, and that's exactly what they're receiving. I can't say that I don't know that the CEO or the team enjoyed sitting in front of the Public Utilities Board for, what was it, through 2 or 3 weeks straight. But I would certainly suggest that that process provided a significant amount of transparency and accountability as it relates to Hydro's thinking around the path forward on the GRA. They were subjected to expert questioning. This is a quasi-judicial environment. I don't know that we could ask for more in the way of accountability on the thinking and planning that Hydro has brought forward as it relates to that broader GRA and rate path question. As it relates to the sort of overall path forward when it comes to new capacity and the IRP, that too will be ultimately submitted to the Public Utilities Board, where it will be subjected to rigorous analysis by experts who will help Manitobans to get that important third-party perspective on the rigorousness and the quality of those plans. So while I appreciate the proposal that you, to look at some other opportunities to come here and talk about hydro sustainability, again, I'd repeat that there's been a process here in place for decades that has worked very well. And ultimately, I would say there has been no shortage of public accountability on the part of Manitoba Hydro when it comes to advancing these plans and ensuring that they are fiscally sustainable.
Thank you, Minister. Any other speakers on the motion? Is the committee ready for the question? The question before the committee is that this committee recommend to the Legislative Assembly that the Standing Committee on Crown Corporations be scheduled to meet quarterly to receive updates from Manitoba Hydro on their debt management reduction plan progress and their business plan to return to profitability. Shall the motion pass?
I hear a no.
I hear a no. I hear a no. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
In my opinion, nays have it. The motion is accordingly defeated.
Okay.
Seeing no further questions, I will now put the question on the report. Shall the annual report of the Manitoba Hydroelectric Board for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025 pass?
Pass.
The report is accordingly passed.
4:52.
The hour being 4:52. What is the will of the committee?
Rise.
Committee rise.